Hello, hello, hello. I'm here with Kraut and Tea, and we're going to be shooting the shit, and we're going to start talking about Antifa, the
Yeah,
anti-fascist movement. How are you doing, Kraut?
I'm doing fine. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. So, the Germans spawned the Nazis, and now they've spawned the anti-Nazis.
Who are Nazis themselves, weirdly
Well,
enough.
in fact, yeah, Nazis. Now, do you have any that we can show people just to demonstrate what we mean by the sort of the new Nazis? Because
Well,
I
there's
mean,
one
they look
thing,
like they're trying to be the new Nazis, don't they?
one thing I can look up, and that's recently. I think it was last summer. We had a gang of 30 people who basically they clad themselves in black, and they stormed the police station, attacked the police officers, threw rocks at them, etc., etc. So if you look on Twitter, with the Antifa recently.
I'm just hang on, I'm just googling the just Antifa. I mean, their logo is black, red flags,
Yeah. Well,
and
the black flag in the background, I guess that's supposed to be a stylistic decision as a shadow of the red flag, but yeah, it looks.
I mean, it looks like a new Nazi organization. I'm not gonna lie. Just, I mean, look at that. Look at that, red and black. Why red and black? Honestly, it just why red and black? It looks evil.
It's probably something with anarchism. It's a weird collective of anarchists, of communists. Oh, you have the anti-Germans there.
Oh, where were the anti-Germans? Sorry.
That's the one with the Israeli flag. These are the people who believe in a Jewish world conspiracy, but they believe it's a good thing. The anti-Germans are the most ridiculous of all of them. They supported the invasion of Iraq in 2003.
Yeah.
Because out of principle, you see the American flag and the Soviet flag in that picture as well. Out of principle, because Germany lost the war against the Soviet Union, the United States, and Britain, they support all foreign policy decisions made by the United States, Britain, and Russia. All the time. Always. It's because we lost the war, essentially.
Yeah. I tell you what, that is amazing.
It's self-hatred on a level you can't imagine. And the thing about them is they are dangerous. They are fucking dangerous. If you think the kind of violence they do, the attacks they do, I'm looking for the statistics right now, but you literally have I think the damage done to private and public property last year by the Antifa goes up in 25 million euro figures or something like that. These are people who organize themselves for violence.
Well, I could fucking believe it. I mean, they seem that way. I mean, anyone who's aware of libertarian socialist Rams, I think he's kind of joining up with these people, and he put out a video recently saying that he's an anarchist and he's voting for the EU, which is just the most, I mean, anti-anarchist thing I can imagine. I'm an anarchist, so what are you voting for? A giant super state.
Why are you voting in the first place?
Yeah, exactly. Why are you voting for any of these things? But surely you should be arguing for devolution, like progressively smaller states that can be eventually broken down into individuals, I guess. I suppose is what they're after.
You shouldn't be doing anything. You're a fucking anarchist.
I know. If you want to change things, then you would think that you would be not voting for larger and larger fucking conglomerations. That's what you would think, But this guy, he puts out a video. I mean, he's literally saying we should get ready to be violent. We should be preparing for it because the right wing are coming for us. And it's like, dude, you're a fucking lunatic. No one's fucking coming for you. No one. But,
well, they believe that, however, and the thing about them is that, I mean, layman. I don't know if you were on that stream. We talked about the Antifa in the stream as well, and he mentioned a conversation he had with one of them who seriously told him that the only way to prevent fascism is to take state control over all the media in the country.
Really?
Yes. So these people are delusional on a level that you can't really imagine. These are people who say, yes, we're the anti-fascist. We're going to tell you what you can watch in the media. We're going to tell you what clothes you can wear. I
mean, I just can't understand how they can think that running around, starting violence against people who are protesting, preventing them from exercising their freedom of speech, and then desiring complete control over all the media, and God knows how far that's going to fucking go. And they claim they are not fascist. It's just one of those. I mean,
the left-wing violence in Germany has a history going back to the 60s, pretty much.
Oh, before then, I mean, the communists and the Nazis.
Oh, the current one. I mean, we had the street battles in between war period. Did you ever hear of the Red Brigades? The
No, I did.
That was a terrorist organization in the 70s and 80s. They planted bombs at US Army barracks and at police stations. They robbed banks. They kidnapped and murdered politicians. They hijacked planes and stuff like that. And
they were pretty fucking serious then. I mean,
they were really serious. It was a state crisis, pretty much. They were pretty much one of the dominating topics in German politics in the 70s and 80s and in German society.
Good Lord.
And the thing about them is that they evolved out of the 1960s protest movement, you know, from the year 1968. And of these protest movements, a few people splintered off and decided, okay, we're not going to achieve communism by peaceful means, so we're going to do it with violence.
Yeah.
And this is the kind of the scariest aspect of this, because I'm pretty sure that most of the current violent Antifa protesters, the ones that storm police stations and stuff like that, used to be these peaceful, weirdish SJW types of people who then at one point decided, okay, we're not going to get there by peaceful means, we're going to switch to violence. And that's the point I'm really scared of by social justice. I'm pretty sure that in the United States and the UK, a few people might splinter off and say, okay, we're not going to achieve this with peaceful means. We're going to grab guns and do it that way.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's just, I mean, these people are undoubtedly Marxists as well. If you would speak to them, they probably sit there wearing their fucking Che Guevara shirt or something like that. And it's just like, okay, look, the only way your ideology is going to work is through violence. It's going to be through. I mean, how has communism ever come to power peacefully?
It's not just. It's. I mean, one recent thing is. What was the name of the politician murdered? RF Mord. God, that's really. That's right. Todesopfer der Roten Armee-Fraktion. I'll share the fucking screen so people can see what I'm talking about. So RAF, the Rote Armee-Fraktion, the Red Army faction, that was the terrorist organization. Right. And yeah, it evolved out of the 1960s. Ulrike Meinhof, I think she was a law student or a journalist or something of that, was part of the founding generation of the Baader-Meinhof complex, which was centered around a student called Baader-Meinhof. And yes, the Entführung, Hans-Martin Schleyer, this guy here, they kidnapped him. Arbeitgeberpräsident, I don't know what, employment minister. They kidnapped him in 1974, I think, held him hostage and demanded the release of several terrorists who had planted bombs at US Army barracks and robbed several banks. And when they didn't, put up to the demands, they put a bullet through his head and dumped his body in a car park. And this is one of the things that recently happened, very recently. There was a retrial of the entire affair because the people responsible for this, some of them have been held to account and brought to justice, but this particular murder is still prominent in German law pretty much and in the German public eye because it really hasn't been resolved yet in a court of law. And the thing about the retrial was that you had, I remember this very clearly on the news report, this was 2 years ago or something, that you had 180 or so Antifa protesters turning up with pro-Red Army Brigade signs. You know, you don't see them wearing Che Guevara shirts. That's a little bit too peaceful for them.
Oh,
they wear ARF shirts. They wear, I actually, I went to one of their sites recently. They sold a T-shirt with, I'll look up later if I can find it, the shirt of Kim Il-sung with a bottle of brandy. and a slogan beneath it saying, "Let's have a communist party."
Oh, well, yeah, okay, fair enough. But that's still just...
Well, these are the kinds of people who, you know, Stalin did nothing wrong, essentially.
Yeah. I love the amount of there's a channel called Laughing at Liberals, and whoever runs it actually goes to these protests and talks to them. And he went to a Bernie protest recently, a rally, sorry, not a protest. And there's some woman there with a Chinese communist leader on her T-shirt.
Oh yeah.
And he goes, it wasn't Mao, it was someone else. And he's like, oh, so you're a communist for Bernie then? And she's like, well, he's not a Stalinist. It's like, oh, what is he, a Maoist? Oh, that's much better. You know, Jesus, I mean, Christ.
It's actually worse.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, holy shit, yeah.
Well, one of them just murdered the clergy in Russia and the Soviet Union. The other one starved 50 million people to death.
But it was necessary, though. Remember, it was greatly thought. It was totally necessary. I'm sure all those people, like, you know what? If this makes China great again, let's do it.
I think I told you how the Chinese famine happened, which is the most ridiculous story of all. There was this.
They
wasn't really a scientist.
All the food, didn't they?
No, there was a Soviet scientist called Lyshenko who wasn't really a scientist. He was just the son of top party officials. And through that privileged position, he was just pushed through biology at his university. And his thesis, his doctor thesis was, what was it? Proletarian solidarity amongst similar plant species. He proclaimed that amongst similar species of plants, there was no Darwinian competition because there was proletarian solidarity in nature.
Hang on. I think I'm about to have a fucking embolism or something because
that's
hang on, we've got to go through this slowly because that just sounds like the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, and I think I must be misinterpreting it. Is he saying that plant species that are very similar aren't competing with each other?
Yes, pretty much. Yes, I have the Lyshenko. Here we go.
I've got nothing.
Lyshenkoism. Lyshenkoism was a political campaign against genetics and science-based agriculture conducted by Trofim Lyshenko, his followers and Soviet authorities. And yeah, pretty much that proletarian solidarity amongst plants. Now that sounds really laughable, but you know his plan was implemented in the Soviet Union and in China, and it was one of the main contributing facts to the Great Chinese Famine. So this stupidity actually caused the death of up to 50 million people.
Amazing. That is just the most. Oh God. Yeah. I mean, there's nothing redeeming about that hypothesis.
No, it's just big party wag. Didn't have any criticism, lived in an echo chamber, nobody questioned the ideas, and of course, they run a fucking country. They run an empire.
Of plants having proletariat solidarity. That's just that's amazing.
Yeah, it's what else is there to say about this?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I thought the Cambodians, the Khmer Rouge, persecuting people with glasses because they thought their intellectuals were stupid. But that is just a whole new level. It's just.
Well, the best thing about the Soviet Union is when Stalin took over, he had this brilliant idea of implementing what he called Soviet time. Because, you know, Russia, they didn't have the Gregorian calendar. I think they had the Julian calendar.
Yeah.
And they switched to the Gregorian calendar that we use in the West. And then they said, no, that's capitalistic, so we're going to abolish it. And we're going to introduce a new calendar, and we call it the Soviet calendar. And we will live under Soviet time. And in Soviet time, a day was 28 hours long, and a week lasted 4 days. and guess what?
I don't mean to laugh so much, but you're really catching me off guard here. Okay.
Yeah, but it caused so much confusion that they abolished it after a month. I mean, the first few years of communism, are just fucking hilarious if you look at it. It's a lot of stuff that doesn't even make sense.
We should.
Yeah, I mean, Stalin demanded from scientists that combine monkeys with humans to create a new race of slave workers and shit like that. These people were really dull, stupid fuck-ups.
Yeah, I mean, how just divorced from reality do you have to be to start thinking things like that?
Well, Lenin was an intellectual, you know, despite all the crimes he committed and all that. You can say at least, yeah, he was an intellectual. He came out of universities, he studied law, etc., etc. Stalin was a gangster, a street fuck from Georgia. I mean, in one of his robberies, he left 50 people dead in Tbilisi. So Stalin was a thug, not any kind of intellectual. He had street gangster logic.
Yeah, without a doubt. Which honestly goes to show his performance in World War II. I mean, I mean, didn't he just disappear for a week when the Nazis invaded?
Yeah, when the Nazis invaded, that's the weirdest thing. When Operation Barbarossa started, the invading German army was surprised to find that the Soviets didn't even shoot back. And the reason for that is because during the first 7 hours of the invasion, Stalin ordered his soldiers not to shoot back.
Why?
Because he thought it was a mistake, because he thought a Soviet soldier mistakenly shot at the Germans or something like that, and that's why the Germans invaded. That's the thing about the Stalinist regime.
I know that they had a non-aggression treaty with the Germans.
Well, the thing about the Stalinist regime is that every Stalinist regime, we say Stalinism, but it includes regimes like North Korea, Saddam Hussein's Iraq, a regime that is built around the leadership of one single person, where one single person is in control of every aspect of society. These regimes have all got one common weakness, and that is the weaknesses of that person.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the whims, the neuroses, the narcissism, and all that, it all reflects itself within the regime. And Stalin believed that the Germans would fight a long war in the West because Stalin, he was a man who ruled his regime on hard-boiled calculations of national self-interest. He modernized Russia. He industrialized it. He wanted to drag Russia kicking and screaming into the 20th century, thereby murdering millions. And he believed that Hitler functioned the same way. He believed that Hitler run his regime on hard-boiled calculations of national interest, whilst in fact that was not the fact. Hitler was a fanatic. Hitler believed in Lebensraum, that the Germans were the descendants of an Aryan race of giants from the Himalayas.
He was a fanatic, but have you seen that video going around of Hitler talking that V has been going on about? Have you seen it yet? No. He's remarkably lucid. He's not like a frothing at the mouth ideologue. I mean, obviously he did believe all this stuff, but he's talking about how the Soviets had 35,000 tanks, and he could not believe that anyone could have so many tanks. And so he sounds like fairly rational when he's discussing.
Well, that's probably from after the invasion, because
absolutely it was,
yeah, because I remember as the invasion started, I think his statement to the troops was something like, this is the Slavic rabbit family, and that they're inferior, and you only have to kick in the door and the whole thing goes down.
Or rotten edifice crumbles. But the thing is, I expected him to sound less in touch with reality. I expected him to be more in denial.
Well, he got less in touch with reality as things continued. That's the big difference between Stalin and him. The more Stalin was defeated, they literally lost 3 million soldiers within the first 6 months of the war or something.
Yeah.
The more defeats Stalin had to endure, the more he relinquished his power over the military to his generals. But the more defeats Hitler had to endure, the more power he seized over the military.
Yes. And the thing is, Hitler's grand strategy was never fabulous anyway. So, why did he invade fucking Russia when he was at war with the West?
Ideologue. It's a pure ideologue thing, because you had oil fields in North Africa. The right thing to do from a military perspective, of course, would have been to invade North Africa, push into Egypt, and seize British oil resources.
Sure.
But yeah, because he believed in Lebensraum, because he believed in depopulating, this depopulating is a nice word, exterminating the Slavic population, he went east.
It just seems ridiculous to me. I mean, you know, just you're busy, for fuck's sake, Hitler. You know, you're really busy on one front, and you've actually got a non-aggression pact with someone who is actually not appearing that he's going to attack you. So why don't you just, you know, I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't want Hitler to win, but there's part of me that's just like, look, this was just such an idiotic idea. You know, it's just, come on, man. Anyone could have done that.
It was an extremely stupid idea. And it's a cliche thing to say, but invading Russia never goes good. It never goes good.
When has it ever worked? The only people it's ever worked out for, as far as I'm aware, are the Mongols.
The Mongols, yeah, but they came from the other side.
Worse. You know, they're like,
and the Vikings, but the difference.
That wasn't really an invasion, though. That was
it wasn't because the Vikings were invited to rule.
yes, they were, weren't they? That's an interesting thing. It was the was it Novgorod or the Kievan Rus?
The Kievan Rus.
It was the Kievan Rus. Yeah, I can never remember which one it was. But basically, to boil it down, they didn't know who to choose to rule over them, and so they asked someone else.
But the common myth about invading Russia is that people always blame it on the winter. I like to say it as well, saying, oh yeah, these things always end in the Russian winter. But whilst the winter contributed to that, the tenacity and resistance and the pure fucking way the Russians react to invasions. I mean, when Napoleon invaded Russia, I mean, he made it to Moscow. Yeah, he conquered Moscow. But the one thing he didn't expect, the one thing that the entire world didn't expect, is the Russians would fucking burn their own city rather than hand it over to an invader.
You know that the Poles took Moscow in I think it was the Polish-Muscovite War. I'm just Googling it now. But they did actually seize Moscow, I'm sure of it. But the problem with this, what everyone forgets, though, the problem with Russia is it's fucking enormous. You know?
Well, it's enormous, but most of it is concentrated in the West. So if you rush and get Moscow, you control pretty much most of the population basis.
You do, but if you've got an active force in Russia against you, they can just retreat much further than you can go and wait you out.
Have you ever spoken with a German veteran of the Second World War?
No.
Well, they will always tell you some story about the importance of winter clothing. That's obvious. But the one thing they will always talk about are the partisans.
Yes.
The people in the back, and how much they completely underestimated the will of the Russian people and the sacrifices that they made.
I mean, it got to the point where they were just shooting them outright, wasn't it?
It got to the point where they just started massacring every single fucking village because they couldn't differentiate anymore.
Yeah, exactly. How could you possibly know, who was a partisan and who wasn't?
I mean, the youngest person to be awarded the Star of the Hero of the Soviet Republic, the highest military order they had, was 12 years old, 13 years old.
Jesus.
A kid who killed German soldiers with machine guns or something like that, a partisan. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, this is one of the things I always found interesting about the Ukraine, when you had like a single German officer leading hundreds of Ukrainians back to the army as captives. I mean, if the Germans had actually gone as liberators, they would have had a lot more success.
Yeah. That's something the German veterans who marched through Ukraine will tell you, that they were welcomed as heroes. And then they conquered Kiev, and the plan of Kiev was they encircled the city, they conquered it, and then they simply cut off the food supply. The intention was to starve the entire population to death over the course of several months, which in the end didn't happen. Yeah. But yeah, they were greeted as liberators in the Ukraine, in Lithuania, in Estonia, in Minsk to a certain degree.
Everywhere when the people hated the Russians.
They hated Stalin. They actually tore down Stalin's statues. The Germans didn't even need to tear down Stalin's statues. The Russian people did it for them. But then the Germans started to starve the people.
Yeah. It's just, the whole thing is just like, it's just a lesson in how not to invade somewhere.
You can't really invade Russia. That's the thing. I think the last people who won the war against the last nation who won the war against Russia were France and Britain in the Crimean War, because it had one clear objective, that is destroy the Russian Navy and destroy its naval capacities. And we do that by destroying Sevastopol. Yeah. One clear objective.
Yeah.
And the objective of the German army was conquer Russia, and you can't. You have no choice but to invade in late summer, because from spring to midsummer, most of Western Russia is a swamp. You can't march through a swamp. You can't drive tanks through a swamp. And then when you invade, you only have a 4-month period to get to Moscow.
Yeah. And the Russians can always pull up huge numbers of men as well.
Yeah.
It's just colossal. And it's.
Do you know why they took so long to get the reinforcements from the east?
What were they rebuilding their factories and whatnot?
No, because that's something often forgotten. Zhukov had to defeat the Japanese.
Oh, right. Okay, I didn't know that.
Yes, the Battle of.
Oh no! Yeah, no, there wasn't there? There was a war.
Yes, the Japanese invaded Mongolia. The Soviet. What was his name? The Battle of Khalgin Gol. Yes, and that happened in 1939, and that was Zhukov's first big battle, and it was actually pretty much military genius, because he deceived the Japanese. He had a plane sent over Japanese line and had it shot down, and on it was documents that said that we were building defensive structures, whilst in fact they were preparing for an attack. So the Japanese were preparing for attacks, and Zhukov prepared his army, in fact, for an attack, and then they just ripped through the Japanese and pretty much drove them out of Mongolia. And the Japanese then begged for a non-aggression treaty.
Right, okay. So that's interesting. So, I mean, did they perform quite well against the Japanese in general?
Really well. They just routed them completely, kicked them out of Mongolia. The Japanese were horrified at the prospect of having a Soviet invasion of China and possibly even Japan.
Right, okay. Because, I mean, one always expects the Japanese to have done fairly well, given the sort of level of morale they had.
They did fairly well in China, but they completely failed in Mongolia.
To be fair, that's probably a failure of the Chinese leadership, though, isn't it?
Let me look at who was the general in that battle. Mishiato Kamatsubura Yawa Makase 35. Oh yeah, maybe one contributing factor is that the Japanese were outnumbered 2-1.
Right, yeah. That certainly helped.
The Japanese had 73 tanks. The Russians had 550.
Okay, fair enough. Maybe this is becoming more and more clear.
Yeah,
why the Japanese lost that one.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, I mean, I take it you've got quite a love of World War II history.
The thing I can't attribute it that much to is my history teacher when I was a kid. That's one of the luckiest cases I had in my things in my life, is that I had a really excellent and inspiring history teacher. And I don't use the word inspiring often.
Yeah.
This is a guy, he was Czech immigrant. And the thing I always remember is that every year he would come in with the current history book of that year that we would have, that we were assigned by the Ministry of Education. And he said, we're not going to use it. We're just going to take one book. And what we're going to do this year is we're going to find all the mistakes in it.
That's an interesting approach.
Yeah. And the thing, his line was always that history is an academic field that is too much abused by politicians and ideologues who reinterpret it. History should always be about the cold fact and the archives. And that's the stuff that he would do with us. He would take us to the state archive, to the district archive, and we would go through archives. And he invited, almost every week, we had a Zeitzeuge, someone who witnessed something in history. We had veterans of wars. We even had a guy who was at Pearl Harbor. We had a veteran of the Vietnam War. I don't know how the hell he got this people. Yeah, and we got to interview these people, and that's something, archiving, interviewing, archiving, fact-checking. That's what we did. We didn't interpret history in any way. We just fact-checked and archived Kraut and
That's
Tea.
excellent. I mean, one thing that people often forget is that history is a social science. People forget that basically what you're dealing with is what people say that happened, and so I mean, it's hard to be concrete on a lot of issues.
Do you have Latin lessons in your education system?
You know what? They stopped. I think it was probably the generation before I went to school. I would love to have done Latin.
That's some. We still have Latin. One thing that we have to do when we call it sixth grade. I don't know which grade when you're 16 years old.
How old is it? 16. Yes. Christ, I can't even remember now. It's been a long time since I've been at school.
We have to translate the Bellum Gallicum, the Gallics by
Julius Caesar.
Really? Yeah.
Well, all of it?
Yeah, pretty much all of it.
Jesus,
I really enjoyed it. It's brilliant work, but it's one of these perfect examples written by the victors. And not just that, it's a very sly piece of propaganda. I oh yeah, I have to defeat that tribe, but by defeating that tribe, I'm going to infuriate that tribe, so I have to take on that tribe, and always kind of finding excuses to continue his conquest of Gaul.
Yes, the Bella Gallico is one of my favorite pieces of work ever. I mean, I like his anthropological work in it because I suspect that's probably not bullshit. When he's describing the various tribes, I think he's probably being honest. Because there's no particular reason for him to lie about that.
The horse hewers.
Yes, it was Swaby horsemen that rout the Roman cavalry horribly.
I think it was the Nervii. I'm not entirely sure.
I'm sure it's a Swaby.
Well, I'd
have to go look. But they absolutely rout the hell out of the Roman cavalry and chase them all the way back to the camp. And they're outnumbered like 5-1 or something like that.
And then Caesar's decision was when they routed his cavalry, okay, I'll just hire them.
Yeah.
Which, I'm not going to defeat those. I'm just going to hire them.
Yeah, he's absolutely fantastic. And weren't they the tribe who had the 100-mile dead zone around their villages, and they're in civilization, basically?
I'm not entirely sure now, to be honest.
It's been about 10 years since I read it. But,
yeah, I thought about reading it as well, kind of recording it and maybe uploading it, because it's really brilliant.
And it is, yeah. I've really got to get around to it. But no, there was one Germanic tribe who were basically the dominant tribe in Germany at the time. I'm sure it was a Swaby, but maybe I'm wrong. But they had like a 100-mile dead zone where they didn't let anyone settle, and that was like a mark of pride. That was like their equivalent of walls, I guess, where it was just demonstrating their power. If you settle anywhere here, we're going to just kill you. And every year they'd march out like 10,000 young men or something, and just go around ravaging.
Yeah, they were basically savages.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, the Celts had pretty great civilization, to be honest. Have you heard about the find in Marseille last year?
I think I did. It was some sort of wasn't it Gallic chieftains? Yes, a wonderful barrow of some kind.
They found Greek vases and wine and stuff like that, and and the interesting thing is they haven't even gotten to digging up the main chamber yet.
Haven't they?
Yes, they're still opening that. So yeah, the Celts were pretty civilized.
Yeah,
the Romans learned more from the Celts than they would ever admit.
Yeah, I mean, Caesar himself says that you had people like the Belgae who were the furthest from civilization and the least effeminized by it. And I love the way he describes it. But again, like when it comes to like anthropological stuff like that, I think he's probably telling the truth. It strikes me as perfectly reasonable to think that the people furthest from high civilization would be the least civilized and most barbaric, and that is exactly how he felt about the Germans, isn't it? So,
yeah, true. But the kind of stuff that we are taught about the Germanic tribes in German schools is not very flattering, to be honest. And it's not because of German guilt. It's just we hardly had iron.
Really. Yeah.
We didn't really know how to work iron. We apparently lived in straw huts, and we were basically the jihadists of that era. Because
that's kind of true, to be honest. Yeah. I mean, the German tribes were. I mean, they were considered scary savages to the Celts. So, and the Celts were considered scary savages to the Romans and the Greeks. So how bad must the Germans have been to the Romans and the Greeks? You know what I mean?
Yeah, we kicked the Romans out. That's pretty much a statement in itself.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, the Celts didn't manage that.
Well, but, yeah, but not exactly, to be honest, because the Teutoburg Forest battle was fought by Arminius, and Arminius was the Romans had this practice of taking the eldest son of a chieftain, training him to be a Roman general, then sending him back in adult to pretty much bring German law.
For anyone who's not aware, the Battle of the Teutoburg Forest happened in, oh god, I can't remember what year now. Probably the 1st century.
Augustus.
Under Augustus. But basically, the provincial commander was called Varus, and he was a surprisingly trusting man of a German nobleman called Arminius, who was a talented guy, and he was planning on uniting all the German tribes under his leadership, which he kind of did very briefly to defeat the Germans in Teutoburg Forest. But the thing is, that whole battle was such a magnificent setup; it could never happen twice.
And the story itself is very often told here. Although it's hard to tell what of it is myth and what isn't.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it probably is myth, but
there's this story that apparently one of the German chieftains tried to tell Varus that that he was about to get betrayed, and that Arminius was going to kill him, and Arminius was sitting right next to him. And Varus asked him if it was true, and Arminius just looked into his eyes and apparently said, I don't know if it's legend or true, it's according to Latin text, yes, I will kill you. And then they both apparently just laughed and took it as a joke.
Yeah. Because he was very, very trusting of Arminius. So it's one of history's great betrayals, in fact. And again, Hollywood, where the fuck are you? This could be an amazing film, like Game of Thrones style film, where Arminius is just working all behind the scenes and then lying to Varus's face. And, I mean, there's a hell of a lot of like the human dimension to that. Can you even imagine what his response was when he realized that he'd been totally betrayed?
Yes, and Varus himself is a very interesting character. I don't know if you ever heard of that. It was said of him by the Roman chroniclers of the time that he's a man who went to the he was governor of Palestine or Judea. Mm-hmm. And he went there he went to a poor land as a poor man and came home a rich man, leaving the country more poor.
Well, that's kind of what most Roman provincial governors did.
Yeah, but the fact that they mentioned it about him specifically is very telling.
Yes, I suppose, but it's really not unusual, is it? So.
Yeah, and he completely fucked up in administering the German province. Because the ancient Germans really had no laws. They had absolutely no laws. If you murdered someone, if one tribesman murdered another one, okay, you could basically just go murder the other one back or whatever the hell.
Or well, they might have had to pay a weregild,
Yeah.
What
you don't do is crucify them publicly.
No. Yeah, there was certainly a cultural clash there.
Absolutely. But you had those in all Roman provinces.
Yeah.
And they didn't build the cities fast enough. They didn't build, the great thing, the Monty Python thing, the great things that come with the Romans. They didn't build them fast enough in Germany to stay.
To be fair, though, if you look at it, Germany was always untenable for the Romans. There was no way they were going to be able to hold it. It was beyond the Rhine. It was just this vast, borderless wilderness full of.
Well, they did build the city of Augsburg. They did manage to get into southern Germany.
They did, but like northern and middle Germany, there was no defending it. It was silly to think that they could expand over it. To be honest, in my opinion, and there was nothing there. What was there for them to take?
Forests.
Exactly, forests and illiterate savages. This is hardly worth Rome's time.
Well, there's nothing in the south either. To be honest, the steel, the coal. Well, coal. What the fuck would they do with coal? The steel was found very late.
No, they used a lot of coal. They used a lot.
Yeah, but not deep earth like it is in the Ruhrgebiet.
Oh, yeah, no. But apparently I've read contemporary accounts of Spain, and it sounds like, I can't remember who it was now. It was years ago I read this. But this chap was approaching the Spanish shore, I think, on a boat, and he was talking about the pall of smog that was hanging over it from the Roman industry there, where they were mining and processing and smelting and all this. And it basically sounded very much like you would imagine Victorian England to sound, very industrialized and dirty.
I read about Carthage. That was one of the texts that I had to translate in school. Love doing that, by the way. Just as a remark, because in the first 3 years of Latin, all you do is translate ancient Roman text, and then you have to do the boring, horrible Christian Catholic shit. And there's wonderful, give you a wonderful insight into everything. And the text about Carthage is that when you go to the city, when you went to the city, you apparently had the smell of burnt olives, the scent of burnt olives in the nose, because they used olives as oil to burn lamps.
Yeah, absolutely. Olive oil was used for almost everything. I mean, like cleaning people was, you would be rubbed in olive oil and then it'd be scraped off you to get the dirt off you and things like that.
I think another thing in that text was the niftiness of the Carthaginians, because Greek wine back then was one of the most wanted commodities in the ancient world. They sold it everywhere. They sold it in Egypt. They sold it in Persia, in everywhere, even to the Gauls.
Savage Gauls drank it undiluted.
Yeah, and the Carthaginians went shit. So what they did was they stamped Greek letters onto their wine vases and sold it as Greek wine, even though it was their shit wine.
That's very cunning. So, since we're talking about the Carthaginians, how much do you think that was written about the Carthaginians is true?
Hardly anything.
So it's a terrible tragedy, isn't it? Because, I mean, the thing is, right, and I don't want to sound like a terrible, terrible person when I say this, but the Phoenician civilizations were always brutal. They very rarely, I mean, like every story you hear about them, they're quite savage. They've got no compunction of doing terrible things to prisoners and to people who are being punished and all this. And so when the Romans say, well, they used to commit child sacrifice occasionally and all this sort of stuff, you think, well, I mean, if anyone was going to, I'd probably peg it on the Carthaginians,
Yeah, I would have to agree in that regard, even though I don't know much about Phoenician civilization.
Oh, they're really savage. They're just cold-blooded, man, when it comes to like just punishments and the sort of what they did to people who resisted and stuff like that. There was just no mercy. And it's like, I mean, I'm not saying the Romans were necessarily any better, but
it shows itself in how they fought their wars, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Just no kind of, we're not going to stand up in formations and fight in order. No, we're going to outwit you.
Yeah,
we're going to play dirty.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I'm not saying it's an invalid or illegitimate tactic or anything like that. I'm just always amazed by the sort of cruelty of the Carthaginians, and it's not something that puts me off them either. I actually kind of like them because of it, not because I like cruelty, but like, I don't know, it's just the brazenness of it.
They're kind of mythical, isn't it? That's the most likable thing about them.
Exactly it. Yeah, it's kind of like it sounds made up. It sounds like the antagonists in a fairy tale or a Hollywood movie or something.
Hannibal is the perfect anti-hero in many ways.
Oh, yeah, it's fantastic.
The Barkid family in general.
Oh,
passed down from father to son to brother, the brother murdered in Spain. It's,
Yeah. No, the story of the Barkid family is actually really tragic because they seem like the only honorable Carthaginians. And it's just like,
yeah, pretty much. Didn't after the First Punic War, the Carthaginian Senate essentially said, "Okay, you lost the war, and therefore we're not going to pay you."
Yeah, and that's exactly what they did. They completely stiffed their own army that's entirely made up of mercenaries, and then obviously the mercenary army decided, well, we're going to revolt and besiege Carthage. And what was Hannibal's father again?
They simply hired. Hasdrubal, wasn't it?
No, it's Hamilcar, wasn't it?
Hamilcar.
They've got like 5. Hang on, I'm going to look this up. They've got like, it is Hamilcar. Yeah, it is Hamilcar. They've got like 5 fucking names in Carthage. It really is annoying. But yeah, it was basically they basically got them a new army and told them to kill the old army, and they did. They killed them all and crucified them. But it was just like, and they totally fucking stiffed them as well. They like gave them a chest that was half filled with lead or something, and it's like, Christ. And
isn't the founding myth also something similar? The Roman founding myth, because I'm not sure if it was Carthaginian in origin, that it's a woman from Phoenicia, a princess from Phoenicia, who landed in North Africa, and the local tribesmen said, you get as much land as you can put a goat's pelt on.
Oxide, I think it was.
Yeah, the myth is that she cut it into strings and then stripped it around what is modern day Carthage.
Yeah, and exactly. That was exactly it. But I just love the idea that they're like, yeah, we're not going to pay our army. Okay, now we're going to hire a whole new army. It's like, you could have just paid your fucking old army. You fucking idiots. Did you think they were just going to go home? So they would pack up and go home?
Well, they probably did. And it's a funny thing that how the ruthlessness is reflected in every single story about them.
It is.
The cunning and the ruthless. So we're going to sell our shit wine as expensive, cheap wine to those Celtibrians and Celts in Spain.
Yeah, no, ruthlessness is the proper word, I think. They genuinely were. I mean, the Romans were as well. Don't get me wrong. I'm not in all of this. I don't want anyone to interpret any of this as a defense of the Romans. They do not need and they do not deserve defending in many ways. But yeah, everything about the Carthaginians. Whenever I read something about them, I'm just like, wow, that is just cold-blooded, man.
Yeah, but there's a lot of stories when you read through the ancient world. I mean, it was I think the only civilized people in the ancient world were the Persians. I mean, the one thing you have to say about the Persians is they're the only civilization in all of human history, and that's something they can wear with pride. The only ones who never had slavery.
That's true. That's very true, in fact.
The only civilized people in the ancient world, pretty much. Didn't slaughter the captives.
The Persians really had a hell of a good deal, actually, because I don't know how much you know about the ancient Near East pre-Persia, but it was brutal. I mean, it was the Carthaginians probably learned a lot of what they did from the Assyrians, and the Assyrians were. And for anyone who doesn't know, seriously, just Google the Assyrians. They were amazing. They were literally like Tolkien-esque bad guys. They were like Sauron and Mordor, made real and given license to just walk across the Middle East, killing everyone. I mean, every year, 100,000-man Assyrian army would just march around extorting vast quantities of money from cities. Just they would walk up to a city and say, right, we're here for tribute. And occasionally a city would say no, in which case they would raise the city. And if they didn't say no, they'd take huge amounts of booty that they would record. And if it came to a battle and it came to sieging cities, I mean, if you look at the Assyrian bar release and stuff, most of it is them sieging cities. Most of it is them killing people. And then you've got the after the battle bits where they're dividing up the loot and they're paying their soldiers by the head. And literally you've got the Assyrian soldiers lined up with heads to give to these scribes who are writing all this down and then handing over golden bracelets and stuff. And it's just like, Jesus fucking Christ. These people were fucking terrifying. And then the Persians came along, defeated them, and were really nice. And everyone liked the Persians a hell of a lot because the Assyrians were just evil. They actually were evil. And so it's one of those things where the Persians just had it made by just going, hey, we're going to be nice.
Well, the Germans also, the Persians also had their religion. I always pronounce it
Zoroastrianism.
Yeah, which was, in comparison to the other savage religions that you had around that time, it was fairly.
They had quite a liberal policy on religion as well.
Yeah. Zoroastrianism is tolerant. It's a tolerant religion. It's tolerant of other faiths.
It certainly was at the time. About 600 years later, the world in general had become incredibly intolerant when it comes to religion. It's interesting to see how much more dogmatic everything becomes as Christianity rises, because the Zoroastrians, they became the same way. They forced it on native populations and whatnot. But yeah, that was hundreds of years later. At the time of Cyrus, they were very, very open to people keeping their own religions. And I mean, that's one of the things that the Assyrians didn't tolerate, really. Everyone had a pantheon, and they just turned around and said, no, Asher has to be the head god of your pantheon, because we're killing you if not. And everyone was like, oh, okay. I guess he will be then. It was an imperial mark, that they put on other people. Like you say, the Persians didn't do that.
It's an interesting idea when talking about evil throughout history. The concept when we judge people, when we judge the historical.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to call them evil. I don't find the term evil and good very, very useful. But it's hard to describe the Assyrians as anything else. Because I mean, they literally, all they did was just walk out and decide to terrorize the Middle East.
Pretty much. I don't know much about them. It's just one thing I like. I read about that was some time ago. You know, when the Mongols invaded the Middle East.
Yeah.
And they besieged Baghdad, and you probably read about it yourself. They beheaded every single citizen.
Yep,
they beheaded every single one.
Yeah.
Then they raised the city walls so nobody could populate the city again, and then they built a mock wall around the city with the severed heads.
Yeah. the Assyrians had been doing exactly the same thing 1,000 or more than 1,000 years before. Where I mean, they would literally behead everyone in the city and then build a pillar of skulls. And they were making pillars of skulls before it was cool.
I do wonder if, you know, in 300, 500 years' time, if some people will look back on certain nation states of our time and say, yes, these were, you know, the nation state really didn't exist back then as a concept.
No.
But if some people will look back and say, oh, this is evil and this is that and this is that.
Well, I imagine there are people who are going to look back at World War II and say, yes, this was evil.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure about that.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm not necessarily judging the Assyrians on that regard. I don't blame them for their political system. You know, you get what you inherit. You know, and when you're brought up in this system, it's often very hard to see beyond it, especially if you're not you're living in an age of scarcity. You know, that's the thing. People always forget how little there was of anything in the pre-modern era.
Yeah. We have that image in our head of people clad in bronze armor, when in fact having a bronze axe, a simple bronze axe, was probably a luxury back then.
Yeah. If you had bronze armor, you were a very, very well-to-do chap.
Probably a king.
Well, no, I mean, no, not necessarily a king, but like you would have been an aristocrat, certainly.
That is probably
financially independent.
That's probably the one reason why the Romans conquered the Mediterranean, because they had chainmail armor for every single soldier, and a sword for every single soldier, and a shield for every single soldier.
Well, honestly, I don't think that's the reason. I honestly think people put too much stock in weapons, and I know that sounds like, you know, probably crazy.
You mean the organization itself into cohorts and stuff like that? Like people put huge amount of stock in weapons and armor. And don't get me wrong, obviously weapons and armor are very important things for an army. But how much difference is there in... I mean, most of them would have had things like chainmail or Lorinka... not Lorinkas. What's the linen Lorica Hamata.
Is that the linen vest, is it?
Hamata. That's the metal braces armor.
Oh, is that not the segmentata?
Wait, there's two. There's the Lorica Hamata and the Lorica Segmata. I think the Lorica Segmata is the chainmail.
No, I think that's the metal plates.
Is that okay?
The Hamata is the chainmail. Okay. But what was the Lena thorax from the Greeks? Yeah. I've seen a bunch of like modern replicas of this, and it looks like perfectly feasible armor. You know, it's tough. You're not going to get a spear through it. You know, and so basically most armor did the job it was supposed to do. It stopped blows from just penetrating through.
Yeah, but the Greeks held on to the phalanx. They held on for about, what was it, 150, 200 years, and they kept holding on to it despite it being outdated. And when the Romans came with the legionary cohort and with the levies, who threw spears before the cohort, it's just, yeah, the phalanx was outdated by then. Turned out to be outdated.
Yes, but again, like I think people have got this perception that I don't think is necessarily accurate. For example, what was the name of the battle where the Romans defeated
Macedonia?
Not Macedonia. The
Seleucids.
No, the Aegeans. The whatever the name of the league was after all that had been done, because before the one that basically led to Greece becoming a province.
I hate the fucking Greek leagues. There's so many of them.
Yeah, I know. I can never remember which league it is they defeated. But there was nothing wrong with the phalanx as a formation. The problem was always the leadership behind it, because if I mean, like with all things, it pretty much unassailable from the front. But if you could get behind it, that was it. And that's how the Romans always beat the phalanxes. They always managed to get around them or get into them, and it was a a lack of discipline or leadership. But there's nothing wrong with the formation itself.
I have to say, though, however, that weapons to a certain degree do. Well,
of course they read this, matter, but I don't think there's such a difference in the weaponry. That's the thing. I think it's the morale and training of the men.
I read a piece in a history magazine in the German one quite a while ago, and the claim was essentially what ended the Roman Empire: the recursive bow. And the recursive bow is when you bend, when you bend the bow back, and you get a lot more bang for your buck.
You did,
and that this. So it was easier to fire from horseback, and it punches right through chainmail and iron armor.
Yeah,
and that with this bow, the Huns were basically capable of defeating the Romans very easily. But yeah, there is a truth to that. That the recursive bow probably gave them a.
It was certainly an awful thing to have against you. I'm not sure.
Yeah, but the Huns mainly drove the Germans to destroy Rome. They didn't destroy themselves.
Yeah, this is the thing though. It wasn't the Huns that destroyed Rome. So,
it was Rome itself to a certain extent. I don't know the name of the Roman general who forged an alliance with the Visigoths and defeated the Huns when they invaded Gaul.
Yeah,
and that could have been a turning point, because that general promised the Visigoths land in southern Gaul. Spain had already been lost to the Vandals and the Suebi. And what then happened was they betrayed the general was murdered by political rivals, and those political rivals then broke the deal with the Visigoths, and the Visigoths reacted by sacking Rome and putting a nail to the coffin, more or less.
Yeah, the Romans were taken down by people who are ostensibly refugees. So it was one of these things where it's like it's political. It's too complicated to just say, well, so and so had better weapons than so and so. I honestly think the weapons are a nice advantage, but if it just strikes me that the political will and the sort of morale of the men and whatnot, the actual it seems to be what's going on inside people's heads that makes a much bigger difference.
It was also a perfect storm. I mean, the collapse of the Western Roman Empire. When the Vandals and the Suebes invaded Spain, it was pretty okay at first, because Spain, Hispania, was a rebellious province. They had countless rebellions in Hispania, always to strike it down, and they were at the brink of a rebellion when the Germanic invasion happened. So they thought, okay, you can have Spain. Fuck off. Go take it. But what they didn't expect was that the Vandals would take parts of the Roman fleet anchored there and then take North Africa. And North Africa was the corn chamber of the Western Roman Empire. That's where most of the income came for the Western Roman Empire.
Yeah.
And with North Africa gone, suddenly I think they lost a quarter or something of their annual income.
Yeah, it was certainly a huge amount. And not only that, then it gave Gaiseric a great bargaining chip, because they needed the money. They needed the food, coming from Carthage. And, I mean, then he got to extort them.
Yeah, and at the same time, it emboldened other Germanic warlords.
Yeah,
it emboldened the Heruli, it emboldened the Suebi to take more of Hispania, it emboldened the Visigoths, it emboldened everyone pretty much.
One of the main reasons the Romans couldn't fight these people off is because private landholders didn't want their men to go off and be conscripted into the armies, and so they would literally hide able-bodied fighting men from the recruiters who would come around to pick people up. And so the Roman army was always massively under strength, despite being the richest and most populous place in the world. And it's just amazing, isn't it? Like that sounds suicidal, doesn't it? So there are a bunch of barbarians coming. Are you honestly more worried about your crops?
It's also an aspect of delusions, in the sense that, especially with the advent of Christianity, the Romans started more and more to believe that they were the civilizing force of the world, more zealously and that they had the divine right to civilize the world, more or less, to make it Roman.
Yeah.
And that it's partly my own interpretation. Last year in Switzerland, there was a find. They found a heap of Roman coins, something like 300 coins or something, bronze and silver coins, hidden, in a field, definitely hidden, holding the coins slammed in there. And it seemed that someone buried these coins there, believing that they would come back after the barbarian holds.
Well, obviously, I mean, that worked out well.
It kind of reminds me of my own family when East Prussian, when my family left. I heard this stories a couple of times that instead of taking everything with them, they buried the cutlery, the silver, and the plates behind the house, thinking that the Reich would still remain and they would come back to East Prussia and get all that stuff.
Yeah. So no, that's a little bit too optimistic, I'm afraid.
Yeah, pretty much.
But yeah, it was very much the same thing, wasn't it? With a lot of places. I mean, we found there are quite a few Anglo-Saxon hoards that are found that look basically like the same thing, where someone's obviously buried this thinking I'll be back for this, and they've never returned.
Oh yeah, that's especially with the Vikings. You have a lot of Christian treasures being found in Scotland and Northern England, where obviously the monks buried them, thinking, "Oh, the Vikings will just leave and we'll get it back."
Yeah, tomorrow will be fine.
Yeah, they're just here to visit. Mm. They'll steal all the chairs and whatnot. They'll leave us alone.
Yeah, I mean, the books. Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's nice having the wisdom of hindsight.
Yeah, yeah.
Looking back, how naive were you? But yeah, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what other sort of historical time periods and areas do you like?
I think my favorite, actually. I mean, the Roman thing is a lot of school of it, and Latin. I fucking hated Latin as a school kid, even though I was fascinated by the Roman texts. We had to read Pliny the Elder, Pliny the Younger, texts by reports by German generals, texts by Augustus, later on some philosophy stuff. I mean, it's really sad that you don't have Latin lessons in school, because that is really.
Honestly, you've no idea. I did a rambly video the other day when I was drunk, arguing for this, because I think that being exposed to these texts teaches you things without you even realizing you're being taught things.
Yeah,
and literally just the fact that they had to, like you say, translate Latin in school. It sounds like the most internally boring thing in the world. But by the time you're done, you've read, how Julius Caesar conquered Gaul, or you've read Pliny the Elder and whatnot, and it's just one of those things where just by like osmosis, you'll end up picking up good ideas. And I think this is a fantastic idea for various philosophers. I think more Stoicism should be taught in schools, because if you look at the problem with SJWs, all of it could be literally solved in an instant by just a minuscule application of a bit of Epictetus or something like that.
There's a big difference. There's a big difference between our education systems, because in Central Europe, in Germany and in Poland, in Austria and the Czech Republic, the tradition of the education system is mainly around sciences. It's mainly about technical stuff around engineering, and the humanistic sciences are hardly respected, to be honest.
Yeah.
You had a big advantage out of that, because your humanistic schools brought you the ideas that ended up creating the American Revolution, that brought up the Enlightenment, whilst our schools ended in Prussian militarism.
I tell you what, as much as I deride collectivism, I think that a lot of people do look at like the Prussian ideals in the same way the Greeks looked at the Spartans. Just like, fair enough, they are like they are respectable. The discipline involved to maintain it is respectable, but no one wants to actually live like that.
No. Yeah, I'm happy it's gone. But, it's the culture by now. Yeah. I mean, essentially, but I remember my grandmother, and I'm not joking, she managed her kitchen like an army colonel would manage a regiment.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, but it's dead by now. But I could see it really much in my I still have some of them who are very Prussian, very strict and everything like that.
Yeah.
And it's a mentality that still exists in the remaining parts of Prussia.
Yeah, I can believe it, and it is admirable, but nobody really wants that, do they? I mean, come on, it's a lot.
It's fucking horrifying.
Yeah,
it's horrifying. It's a weird thing as well, because I talked about that recently. you know, there's this weird notion, you know, Prussia, that's the height of all Germany, you know, that's the height of German culture and whatnot, and the most respectable of all German things. But
Not
the
sure
thing
I'd
is,
say that. Yeah.
yeah, no, I got a lot of these things from members of the alt-right who
Oh, right.
believe,
Yeah.
and I had some alt-righters say, "Oh, you're Prussian! Wow, you're Prussian!" And the thing about the Prussians is, if you look at the Vienna Congress that was held after the Napoleonic Wars, Prussia was registered as a Slavic nation. And the truth behind, yeah, it was. The thing about Prussia is, it was conquered by the Teutonic Knights who were German, but the main population was Slavic.
Yeah.
And Prussia was pretty much a Germanized Slavic nation.
Yeah.
It wasn't really inherently German.
But not only that, I mean, maybe the height of like German militarism or something like that, if you were going to describe it that way. But I mean, they really have a romanticized view of what these civilizations were like. And yeah, okay, when they took the field, they were incredible. Like, I mean, you get exactly the same thing with Sparta. It's, you know, when they took the field, they were very good. But if you actually look at the quality of life of the people in these civilizations, it's not high.
No, it's not really romantic from what I heard. Ragnitz, where my family was from, that it's really the outermost east edge of East Prussia. It's like really the Russian border right next to it. And from where it's cold, it's forest, it's fields, it's flat. There were farmers, and yeah, it didn't really sound like a wonderful life. Yeah, not at all, in fact. And Prussian militarism itself is, people would like to think that it comes out of the tradition, you know, of the Teutonic Knights and shit like that. But really, its origins are in Hegelian philosophy that took hold in Prussia and the Wilhelm III. And was it Wilhelm or was it someone else, the Prussian king during that era? I don't know. But militarism, that was the Prussian militarism was a counter movement to the Napoleonic revolutionary zeal, a way of justifying the Prussian state.
Yeah, not only that. I mean, it was kind of a necessity as well, wasn't it? I mean, if you look at the geographical location of Prussia, it had enemies on all sides. It could be invaded from anywhere. You know, so
the bigger concern at that time was the enemy from within. I mean, when you asked me about historical things, my favorite historical period, the one I read the most about, the most I research, is the 19th century. It's the revolutionary era. You know, the years from 1780 to 1860 or something like that. And the main enemy during that period was the enemy from within, the fear of revolution. And that is where the Prussian militarism came out of, because the nationalism, the early nationalism of the 19th century, the idea, you know, it was more like, it wasn't based around mythical notions of race. It was based around notions of citizenship, of civic duty, of being, you know, having an inherent birthright merely due to being a human being. It had quite a lot of really respectable values to it. I mean, its first actions was, for example, the emancipation of the Jews in France. And the Prussian school was more or less to capitalize on that, to take it away from them, to take the concept of nationhood away and make it this weird militaristic thing. Have you ever read Hegel and his...
I haven't.
Okay, don't bother, because it's bullshit. I don't know why people regard him such a great philosopher, because he really isn't. I mean, it's crap. It's absolute horseshit. Because he was a progressivist. He was someone who believed in society progressing. You know, he believed in historicism, that society has a destiny and that history is a process of humanity moving towards a greater state of being. He believed that the greatest state of being for society was the Germanic kingdom of North Germany, being a Prussian kingdom, and that English democracy would lead to chaos, French republicanism would lead to chaos, and the Prussian monarchy was the holiest thing of all. You know.
So he was a proper ideologue in that regard, then.
Yeah, he was nothing but an ideologue. Let me look. Where's my Hegel? Some of the shit he writes is just fucking amazing. I'm going to look for the book. If I find it, I'm going to read you a line. You're going to fall over laughing.
Yeah, okay, go on.
It's... well, I'm just going to look through my library, but we'll have to keep talking to keep the people entertained.
We will.
Yeah, no, it's something like light. God, I have to find that. I have to find my Hegel, because this is just He wrote a book called the Philosophy of Nature, and it's essentially a bunch of incoherent ramblings. That's really all it is. It's nothing but incoherent. Sound is the manifestation of light and energy to project forces through the ear. And what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah, I mean, okay, I understand that, science wasn't necessarily the most popular thing at the time, but that is just nonsense.
Yeah, I think the best thing about Hegel is what Schopenhauer wrote about him.
Yeah, I've heard. Schopenhauer's been on my list for a while actually. After I read Kant, because a lot everyone was like, "Well, Kant's good, but Schopenhauer has some good critiques of him," and it's like, Christ.
No, well, he has some very frank critiques, which is
I've not got around to it yet.
Hegel is a profiteer of the state. Hegel is not a philosopher; he's the state's philosopher.
Right. So he's effectively a propagandist.
Yeah, he's not doing any. There's not really any deep philosophical criticism to make of Hegel, because in my opinion, Hegel isn't really a philosopher. He's a bullshitter. He's an ideologue. He's a narcissistic servant of the Prussian state. There's nothing more to him.
Right. Okay. Like I said, I've not read either one yet, but they are on my list. But I'll have to get around to it because it's interesting. I like the kind of the drama of it as well, the intellectual drama of it. When someone just when you get just a devastating takedown of some sophist, it's like, okay, that's pretty good.
yeah, but that was pretty much Hegel's purpose throughout his entire philosophical career. It was worshipping the Prussian king until the Prussian king invited him to come and be the chief philosopher of the Prussian state at the university in Berlin. Hegel went, of course, didn't refuse that offer and became the official philosopher of the Prussian militaristic state.
Yeah. Well, I suppose if you're going to kiss ass enough, then fair enough.
Yeah.
This is one thing that always cracks me up when people talk about Machiavelli, because in the foreword to The Prince, there's this unbelievable amount of ass kissing towards Piero de Medici, and everyone's like, oh well, he was just sucking up to this guy for money. It's like no, look, that's an idiot's interpretation of what's going on here. For Christ's sake, look a bit deeper. But anyway, I won't go into it.
Yeah, it's most of the philosophy books, when I go through my library, you don't find these long narcissistic things in them. You don't find long. No. Here in Pop, I have a quote of Samuel Butler, but that's pretty much it, and a quote by Kant at the beginning, but that's it. And you only find there's long rambling worshipping of people in books by people who are not really philosophers, like Hegel, who keeps meandering about the Prussian king. And what was his argument against French republicanism? That
I don't know.
It was something that the state is the manifestation of the will of the people. As such, the state is the ultimate good, and everything the state does is good. And his notion of destiny was that humanity itself is a playing field, and that it was the destiny of nations to be at war and to compete on that playing field.
Fucking hell, this guy is nuts.
He was nuts. It is his philosophy, and some people might disagree with me on that. His philosophies is what essentially outlaid the plan that led to the Franco-Prussian War and later on to the First World War. This mindset of his really ingrained itself deeply into the Prussian state.
Yeah. I listened to Dan Cullen's World War I podcast, and it was amazing. And he very much hammered the point home that a lot of the German youth walked into battle as if they were using melee weapons, as if this was some heroic saga that they were engaged in. And they ended up just getting gunned down by the British forces en masse because they were using guns, So
yeah.
What would you expect? And these people like walking arm in arm and stuff like that. And it's just like, it's like they're really fighting sort of like a few wars back, it sounds,
Prussian culture was always kind of centered around that.
Yes.
It's this virtue of being militant, of sacrificing yourself in an army for the state and for the king. Yeah. It was really brutal.
Yes.
I mean, if if you read through some of the biographies and autobiographies and memoirs by some of the people who led the Prussian state, it's the mindset is fucking. It's hilarious at occasions. It's hilarious. It's you have you ever read Bismarck's memoirs?
No, I haven't. I really should get around to reading all these things. They do sound very interesting.
Well, Bismarck, oh God, there's this amazing line where he writes about he's the guy who introduced socialized healthcare in Germany in 1880, and he did it as a compromise to appease the Socialist Party and to leave him alone and shit like that.
Yeah,
but he hated them, and he hated Catholics especially. He really hated Catholics, and because he thought they were conspiracy controlled by the Pope to take over Germany.
Oh, okay. Well, they probably are.
As much hatred as he spews throughout his book, for socialists and for Catholics, there's this one line. This is really amazing, which is the only thing worse than the socialists and Catholics are the liberals of France and Germany and Britain with their consistent meandering about liberty. There is no such thing as liberty because it is determined by God where you are and how free you are.
That's a persuasive argument, I suppose. If you believe in God and you can look, I mean, I could see how people could buy into it.
It's the kind of argument you would expect from an ISIS member.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm not saying that I would want that, but I mean, I'm just trying to picture how persuasive it would be to the average peasant or something, I mean, you would look around and go, well, yeah, I was put here by God, and this is my station in life. I can't change it. So, any irrelevant prattling about liberty could seem foolish,
Well, yeah, but his argument was more or less he was an arch-monarchist and an arch-anti-parliamentarian. Any notion of having a parliament disgusted him. Any notion, he was an arch-conservative. But even the Conservative Party that existed in the then Reichstag hated his guts because he didn't even believe that they should exist. He didn't believe in the entire concept of parliamentarianism and governance through representation.
Yeah.
He believed it was nonsensical. There's this funny line where he writes about the first attempt at the German Revolution. When people started to rise up against the various kings, tried to unite Germany like a French republic. And after that revolution was crushed, he wrote this weird line, which is, we were days away of having English circumstances in Germany, of having an English situation in Germany, kind of as a dig at the English parliamentary system. Yeah. He just had an utter disgust for the entire thing.
Disdain, isn't it? I mean, and ironically, that would have been a good thing for Germany. I mean,
he unified Germany, but the thing is, the fact that he unified it.
Yes.
I mean, he's still remembered as he is a gigantic historical figure, especially for us. There's a reason why we in admiration call him the Iron Chancellor.
Yeah.
But the fact that he unified it and the way he unified it, by humiliating France, essentially making German pride a matter of French humiliation. I mean, that's essentially what he did.
That's a very great way of putting it, though. I'd never really thought about it like that. But I think that's it. Man, it's what the thing is, though. The Prussian mindset. One of the things I think. I mean, I certainly have a real problem with understanding, and I think a lot of people in the modern era do, is the idea of an ancient Near Eastern king. Is because people think of kings and they think, well, they're not even absolute monarchs in feudal eras still had to deal with their underlings, but the sort of the way things were in the ancient Near East was a lot more. I mean, the king was basically the god, and people. People would literally think of the king in the same way that you were saying Hegel thought of the state,
Yeah,
and it's so hard to think of a person that way. It's no longer a person. It's effectively a mythical being in people's minds, in the same way that it's no longer really just a country. This is now like an ideal he's talking about, and it's hard to think of anything that way, I find. Me particularly anyway, because I'm just not, obviously not raised that way. I just don't understand it. And for me, it was one of the most difficult things to just get my mind around. The idea that you genuinely see this guy as like an ideal, regardless of what he actually does. So, but yeah, it's just me.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling.
Yeah,
but it's always easy to fall into a kind of historical determinism in that regard, because Prussia started out as a state of religious zealots who were invited by the Poles to massacre the last pagans of Europe.
Yeah,
which was a stupid idea, because they just stayed and started massacring the Poles. Which, yeah.
Well, yeah. But the thing is, the way you were discussing, telling me about the Prussian mindset, it just reminded me very much of how I felt about reading about the Assyrians. Because they created the first professional standing army. They were incredibly militarized. The whole culture was very much like the same sort of situation with Prussia as well. Geographically, it wasn't entirely different. They could be invaded from practically anywhere, and so they had to invade almost everywhere to make sure that they were the ones doing the invading. And yeah, the sort of devotion. You get things like if a captain fails to carry out an order in a battle, then he's executed. He gets executed. If he doesn't just do it exactly when he's told to do it, he gets, I don't know what the execution was, but that's a death penalty for not, and even if you're there going, Christ, that's a bad idea, or there was no initiative like the Roman captains and the Greek captains were bad. It was absolute control.
Yeah, it's also strict in terms of punishment. Yeah, your comparison actually makes sense, because a lot of the German military traditions are built upon Prussian models, and the Prussian military model was extremely ruthless.
Yes, and it's literally to the point where if you don't obey this order, you get killed, and it's like, Christ, that's crazy, But that's
if you read through the Wikipedia articles of the Prussian generals of the Second World War, you will find a lot of stories where you just scratch your head in disbelief almost. The guy who managed the occupation of Norway. And there's this story that a Norwegian woman came to him and complained that German soldiers stole a glass of jam of her. And the next morning, he went to her house, picked her up in a car, drove him back to the army barracks, and forced her to watch that soldier being executed by firing squad by his own regiment.
Jesus.
So that's pretty much the stories he gets out of the Prussian military system. It was extremely ruthless.
Yeah, and that's the thing. This is the thing when you're talking about, I'm bringing the Assyrians because everything I've read just reminds me of that so much. And and it's the fact that you've got this higher ideal that's lauded. That's
the state.
Exactly.
The state. And the state in Prussia, has to be said, was the army.
Yeah, but that's very much the Assyrian and the king. The king was the army. He had his own professional fighting force. These men did nothing else, but they were his soldiers. And every year they went out and fucked people up, and he was the state. And it was, it was that sort of mindset. And it's horrible, terrifying mindset. But very fascinating.
It's kind of good that it's gone.
I'm so glad.
I'm not kind of saying that, Prussian culture, it is kind of sad that it disappeared, but the Prussian militarism, I'm not...
In a romantic way, but in a realistic way, it's good that it's gone.
Yeah, I don't feel Prussian in any way.
Yeah, it's like the Greeks with the Spartans. Like you hear people talking about lovely things about the Spartans, even in their own day. Everyone admired the Spartans, but nobody wanted to live that way. And it's probably a good thing they're gone.
There's always various aspects to it. Though. There's always this. My family stories on Prussia give a weird kind of insight. It's deeply religious, also deeply conservative.
Yeah,
very, very strict moral codes, very strict, comparable in a certain way to evangelicals in the Bible Belt, maybe to a certain degree, with the difference that they were not obese. Farmers mostly on very arid, rugged lands. Not a nice place to live. Cold, not much to live from. You have to live off basic stuff from the land. And Prussian cuisine is stuff like fish. What is it? Fish in how do you call it when you preserve something in vinegar?
Pickling.
Yeah, pickled fish. That's Prussian cuisine. Pickled fish and bread.
Sounds delicious.
Yeah.
That is, yeah, you can see why these people would be angry, I suppose.
Yeah. Ruthless and brutal. Yeah, and very religious as well. That's kind of how it... That's also the interesting thing, because the Prussian generals were the one who revolted against Hitler. And I guess a lot of it had to do with the kind of moral upbringing that the Prussian state brings with it. I remember that, I think it's something I mentioned in the video I hosted on your channel, that my great-grandfather was thrown into concentration camp for making a joke about Hitler.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I put it in the video for your channel.
Right, okay. I can't remember off the top of my head
then. Yeah, that's the thing, that he came back from the First World War as a pacifist. You know, he was at the Somme, he came back, and he absolutely... it probably was one of the most horrible experiences you could have.
Yeah, absolutely.
And as such detested the Nazis, and was a firm... he was a very religious man. And that's something that I found... This is a story from from my family, that the priest in the village that my family was from was also very anti-Nazi. And the day that the Nazis took over in the village, suddenly the Sunday mess wasn't held. And nobody knew what was going on. And they went to his house. The house was broken in. The floors were covered in blood, and he was gone, meaning the Gestapo had taken him.
Yeah, of course.
And apparently this happened throughout various villages in East Prussia, that the Gestapo just turned up and picked up the various priests who were in a certain way kind of centered in this, conservative rural societies.
Yeah. So, right, okay. I'm going to go get a cup of tea because I'm gagging for another drink.
Yeah, sure.
So if you want to talk to the chat or something, go ahead. Otherwise, I'll be back in a minute, guys.
I'm apparently a 100% distilled cock. Hail. Yeah, I'm not going to talk Nazi stuff. I'm sorry to disappoint you there, chat. Very sorry, but you're probably going to continue posting it now. Les anecdotes. That is disturbing. Pickled cock. No, pickled cock. Oh, fucking hell. Talk to us, bitch. Talk to us. Russell time. Gee. Kraut is time to fuck us. Get Dr. Lehman on. If you send an invite to Dr. Lehman, it's always a 50-50 thing. He either comes on or he sends the invite to 4chan. Tell us about Arminius. Arminius was a Cherusci. He was the son of a Cherusci warlord. The Cherusci were a tribe, a kind of a kingdom in ancient Germania. And when the Romans occupied Germania, they took him with them to Rome to give him an education as a Roman general. And they sent him to the Balkans, basically in what was today Croatia and Bosnia, Illyria, as it was called then, to manage the province as a general, to strike down rebellions and fight off invading tribes. And as doing so, he gathered an incredible knowledge about the Roman army and how it was managed and how things worked in the Roman army. And this knowledge of the Roman army is essentially what made it possible for him to defeat the Romans at Teutoburg Forest. Could you say Kant again? Kant. Yes, Kant is just a name in Germany. There's a village in Austria called Fucking. It's pronounced Fucking. And it's named after the Bavarian noble family called the Fuckingers. Kraut, what's up with the avatar? The avatar is Heinrich Heine, who is a poet and, he's kind of one of the few Enlightenment figures that we had in 19th century Germany. Fucking Widerstand. Widerstand is not written with an I and an E, it's just an I. Widerstand. Fucking Austria. Pseudo-intellectualism. Yes. Avraka Scheckelstein. Fucking gas. The fucking hair. Hey, Kraut, what's up with the avatar? I already told you, it's Heinrich Heine. If you want, you can look it up on Wikipedia. I'm not the Kaiser. The Kaiser has been gone for almost 100 years. In Cardiff, we have a Fanny Street. That's wonderful. Fanny Street. We had a football player in our national team called Cunt. Cunts, yeah, plural, Cunts. Kuntz. Cunts. Kraut, please notice me. I'm not senpai. Bring the Kaiser back. I don't think the Hohenzollerns will come back. I think the Hohenzollerns now live in Belgium. I think some of the German royal family no longer even speak German, but French now, which is kind of ironic. Did you know that what remains of the Russian royal family now lives in Spain, which is also weird. Kraut for Kaiser. No, I'm not going to be Kaiser. Oh my God, he noticed me. Yes, I noticed you again. Deus Volt. Eat some dick. Hi, Volkswagen is shit. Yeah, I prefer BMW. Thoughts on Kierkegaard? Not really, no. Get the Romanian. No, he'll steal all the shekels. Kraut swearing German. Scheiße, Arschloch, Hodenfuchs, Wichser. Here you go. Do you want me to speak German to you? Yugo Wars. Sargon having a French vanilla situation. Oh, Jesus. Wieder. Again, wieder against. Play a Moonman song. Moonman, can't you see? Kraut, how should I kill myself? Slowly. Kraut. Jesus, this is going too fast. I have to slow this down. Okay. Cyclone B. No. Wow, this was gay. Asian history. And the sowjetische Stielhandgranate. Achtung. I think I told you that story already. I'll wait.
Did you make it to Alpha Cook yet?
Yeah, it's mainly the Kaiser and shit like that. And someone mentioned the grenade story I told earlier at a different stream.
Yeah. So, well, Kaiser's not bad. I mean, you could have done worse than the Kaiser.
Yeah, but the last Kaiser was kind of the most ridiculous monarch in the last century of European history.
What exactly did he do?
He grew up in a household with a very loving father and a nasty mother. Okay. And he had a disabled left arm. You can't really see it in footage of him. Right. But he was left-handed, and they desperately tried to make him right-handed by tying his arm up in a uncomfortable position behind his back. Okay. Throughout his entire childhood, basically, to force him into being right-handed.
That's a bit harsh.
It's really
left-handed. Christ.
And his mother was completely unloving, and she essentially hated her child for being left-handed. And that's...
Fucking how irrational is that?
Yeah. And that brought up a massive inferiority complex. That's the reason why he fired Bismarck. It's the reason why he essentially destroyed diplomatic relations with Russia.
I understand it, I thought he became incredibly reliant on Bismarck.
Well, when Bismarck... he became Kaiser at the age of 29, and Bismarck was essentially granddad at that time. He was 70 or something. And Bismarck had steered the nation. He united Germany through going to war with Denmark, Austria, and France. And after these 3 wars, he decided that it was time for peace, to manifest Germany's position in Europe. And to manifest Germany's position, he wanted to create enmity between France and Russia and the German alliance with Russia, to guarantee that France and Russia never ally against Germany.
Yeah.
And to do that, he refused in colonial politics and anything like that. And the Kaiser wouldn't have it. The Kaiser wouldn't have foreign policy dictated to him by this old man, so he fired him. The Kaiser said, no, we should be more aggressive. We should be aggressive towards the Brits by building a gigantic navy that rivals theirs. We should insult the Russians. And of course, we should constantly celebrate the fact that we humiliated the French. Yeah, all because of his inferiority. What?
How could all of this go so terribly wrong?
Yeah, and it's the funniest thing that in the dying years of Bismarck, the horrible person that he was. Okay, not really horrible. It's hard to judge Bismarck.
He just sounds very Machiavellian to me.
Yeah, but the thing is, his last years when he was out of power, the one thing he kept saying is, the Kaiser is going to lead us into doom. The Kaiser is going to lead us into a war with France and Russia. The Kaiser is going to get us surrounded. The Kaiser is going to get us into alliances with our old, weakened enemies who are weak because we defeated them. And he was almost
wrong,
yeah.
was it?
He wasn't wrong. Yeah, he completely predicted it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I love what was it, Churchill's comment of some Great War will start of some damn thing in the Balkans. And it's like, well, you got that one.
Yeah.
It's spot on there. It's,
There's the guy using my profile picture, Heinrich Heine. There's his famous historical quote: "The people who burn books will end up burning human beings."
Yeah, it's a fantastic one, and
yeah,
very true in every fucking case.
Germans in quotes.
To be fair, though, Germany's produced some of the greatest minds of all of history, so there is a lot to celebrate there. This is one of the things that breaks my heart about like the self-hatred of modern Germans. It's like, man, people look up to fucking German intellectual thought.
It's really the years 1860 to 1945 that we fucked everything up.
Yeah,
massively. 1860.
Yeah,
when Prussian militarism started to unite the German Empire.
Yeah, I mean, my favorite areas of history are the Middle Ages and the ancient world. And one of the things that I recently was reading Harold Lamb's vast epics about the Crusades, which are absolutely fantastic. I couldn't recommend them more highly. But one of the things he emphasizes is just how afraid of the Germans the Arabs were, and because the German Kaiser, the Holy Roman Emperor, he almost had like this mythic sort of status, because they knew there were all these small things in Europe, small states in Europe, but then you have the giant German Empire in the middle, and it took on a life of its own. And so when it turned out that, when they heard Barbarossa was leading down, a man with a legendary reputation anyway, was leading down 100,000 men to Palestine, they were like, shit, this is just a huge thing. and then he dies crossing a fucking river, and it's, oh, Jesus Christ.
The funniest thing about that is that when the Holy Roman Empire finally came to the Middle East, what was his name again? He just he rode up alone to Suleiman's camp and said, "Hey, I would like to play a game of chess." And played a game of chess and said, "You know what? Open your borders to Christian pilgrims and I'll fuck off again." Okay, I'll fuck off again.
When was that? Was that Suleiman the Magnificent? Or?
Yeah, which one was it? The Holy Roman Empire who made the peace treaty. I'll look it up. Heiliger Römischer Kaiser decided to make German. That's I'd have to find his name. The funny thing about him, Ferdinand the First.
Right.
Ferdinand? No, not Ferdinand the First.
No.
Yeah, that was essentially his decision. He was ordered by the Pope to go on crusade. It was after King Lionheart was kicked out of the Middle East.
Yeah.
And he essentially rode up to Suleiman's camp and said, "Okay, we're going to make a peace deal. I'm going to play chess with you, and we'll just allow Christian pilgrims in again, and I'll fuck off." That's a very popular story in Germany, because he came back home after making that peace deal and was completely alienated by the Pope and all the other kingdoms in Europe. And the Pope excommunicated him, and he was forced to, in rags, carry a wooden cross from which German city was it? I think it might have been Cologne. From Cologne to Rome, through the Alps.
Bloody hell.
Yeah, he was forced to do that, carry a cross to Rome and kiss the Pope's fingers, essentially.
Well,
for making a peace
Ferdinand of Aragon?
Yeah. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Wait, he was born in Sicily, I think.
Right, okay. I'd have to look it up.
Heiliger Römischer Kaiser, Sizilien geboren. He's pretty famous here. He's also kind of a mythical figure in German history.
Right, okay.
List of Holy Roman Empires. God, I'll have to go through the list, but which year was the Crusade? 12th century. Philipp von Schwaben, Otto von Bayern, Friedrich. Yes, Friedrich II.
Right, okay.
Friedrich II was it? Yeah. he was the one who made the peace deal with, yeah. And he was born in Sicily. He was one of these, you know, Holy Roman Empire, the Holy Roman Empire, when it divided the Frankish kingdoms, Italy was given to the Germans. And he was, I think, the only one who came out of an Italian territory to be Holy Roman Empire.
Right, okay. Well, wasn't he quite bookish? He wasn't like, he wasn't a great soldier or anything like that, was he?
Yeah, a book boy.
Yeah, he was mentioned in this history I was reading. But I honestly, by that point, I was kind of not bored, but I was paying less attention by that point. Because
I know what you mean.
There were going to be no epic adventures with this guy, so I was just, you know, vaguely listening to it.
Yeah, German history is remembered as the guy who was ahead of his time.
Yes.
The guy who wanted to make peace with the Muslims, more or less, and for that was ostracized by the European.
To be fair, Richard the Lionheart did exactly that. I mean, you know, the Third Crusade ended with him signing an agreement with Saladin for the pilgrims to be able to travel to Jerusalem.
Yeah.
You know, so I mean, it's not like it was unheard of. I suppose maybe they were just a bit more militant about it.
Yeah, the fact that he had to carry a fucking cross to Rome from Germany. Yeah, it's a myth here in Germany. It's a mythical figure thing. We have a few mythical figures left from our history, even though most people kind of want us to only remember the era from 1933 to 1945.
It's a real tragedy, man. It really is. I mean, it pisses me off, frankly.
Did you know that during the early 19th century and during the 18th century, the prevailing stereotype of Germans was that they were a lazy and overly romantic people who were unable to get shit together? And the stereotype being...
you can believe it though, because you know for a long time they didn't.
Yeah, we unable to form a unified state, just weird federal unions and market unions. I mean,
it's weird that people took pride in that, because I actually think it's a sort of testament to the independent sort of Germanic spirit that they didn't do these things. You know, I mean, long you know, even when like the Anglo-Saxons came over to Britain, you'd hear about the councils they'd have of the free men and stuff like that. It was, you know, quite democratic, really.
Well, it still exists.
Well, yeah.
It really is the reason why our economy is so good, to be honest. I mean, of course, our education system contributes to that, but the thing is that our states are 60. I mean, the fact that we have city-states, I think is very telling.
Yeah,
Hamburg, Bremen, Berlin. There's a lot of competition between the states. A lot of competition.
But I think that kind of independent mindset's very healthy. You know, I think that it's one of the great boons of the Germans.
Well, it's not really a German thing, to be honest, because you have the thing in Italy where Italy is, despite what you heard in recent years, you know, it's the 8th largest economy of Europe.
It is, yeah.
And the reason for that is that the south, everything south of Rome, is essentially a third world country. It really is. It's impoverished shithole, whilst the north is incredibly rich. And the reason for that is the north used to be independent city-states way up to the 19th century, and that spirit of independence is still very existent in Milan, in Venice, in Turin.
What I mean is, that's kind of my point. I mean, these places, they do very well. You know, these very independent-minded places, they do well economically. You know, I think there's a lot to be said for like smaller sort of
for devolution.
States. Yeah, for devolution. Yeah, exactly. I think there are many strong arguments for it, and this is why I'm shocked at the anarchists. Like, look, dude, it's obviously better for more people if government is closer to the people. You know, it's just obvious. You know, I mean, this is surely your point. That's surely why you're an anarchist, but you're voting for the EU.
It's funny that you mentioned this, because it is better for governance if you have regional governments. I mean, there's always deficiencies. It's easier to be corrupt as well in regional government.
It's easier to hold these people to account.
Yeah. But it's also easier to find solutions to problems.
Yeah.
It's the thing that we had a phenomenon a few years ago, you know, of old men starving to death. Yeah. And the reason for that is because we had more widowers than widows. And the reason for that is that after the Second World War, a lot of women married younger men who were like 10, 20 years younger than them.
Okay.
And they, of course, died earlier. And these men didn't know to cook. And being embarrassed about that, they didn't cook, and they would literally starve themselves to death at home. They would literally, starve.
Christ.
And and I remember that it isn't something nationally. I just remembered it personally on the regional level in my local surroundings. And the solution for this was brought up by local governments, by simply the council of the community hiring 5 women, paying them a monthly salary to turn up at their houses once a week and to cook for them, or once a day, or to gather them together at a gas stove. Some communities paid these men to eat at the gas stove, stuff like that.
Yeah, but this is always my point. I mean, when it just seems to be a common trait that the closer, the more local the government, the more prosperous the people.
And it's the competition thing. I have to say, it's the competition thing. I mean,
oh yeah, absolutely, competition, absolutely. But I wonder how much of it is creating more like individual competition within people in the local area. You know, because so many people check out politics when it's more remote from them. That's the thing. The more remote it becomes, the less people become interested, because the less direct impact it has on their daily life. Whereas, if you've got quite like strong local councils and whatnot, you can get quite a lot of sentiment about it, because they'll be making the changes that are actually affecting the people on the ground.
And that's the thing about our government system. It's essentially designed for the states to be a constant thorn in the side of Berlin, of the federal government.
That's how it should be.
The states essentially, I mean, being the governor of a state here brings enormous political power. Enormous power. If you are governor of a state here, there's actually no reason to aspire being chancellor, whilst being governor of a state in the US might give you a reason to aspire to being president.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a governor of Germany. And the interesting thing about the states here, it's kind of a being proud of German nationhood, of being German itself in the last 60 years, was replaced with being proud of your state. Bavarians will always tell you that they're Bavarian.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I went to the Oktoberfest a few years ago, and it was very nice. But man, you couldn't get away from I guess I call them Bavarian nationalists.
The flags.
Yeah, just and not only that, but just you'd be sat at a table and someone would sit next to you. You start you find out if they spoke English, but most of the time they did. And you start talking to them, and I mean the first couple we spoke to were this older couple, and they were very, very nice, and so we had a nice chat with them. We were only about fucking mid-20s at the time. We had a nice chat with them, and then these young chaps sat next to us, and they were a lot more boisterous, but that was fine because we were all drunk and we thought it was great. And then they started basically talking to us about Bavaria, and everyone's just like, okay, what? And it was just the most uncomfortable thing in the world, where they were trying to get us fired up about Bavaria, and it's like, what?
Yeah, that's typical Bavarian.
Yeah, it was, and that happened multiple times.
The Bavarians are essentially the German Texans. It's your friend. The Bavarian is your friend, but he's the kind of friend who calls you in 3 a.m. to ask if it's okay to sleep with your ex. That's the Bavarian. Very boisterous. Likes to tell you that he's from Bavaria and how great Bavaria is. I
mean, don't get me wrong. I heard that Bavaria was really good. So
I love it here. I absolutely love it. I'm not Bavarian myself. I mean, it has a bad reputation in Germany itself because it's so arrogant, but it's a nice place. It's a pity I'm not going to stay here, but it's really nice.
Yeah, I mean, I did enjoy it when I was there. Don't get me wrong. Everything about it was lovely.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's 2 places in Germany where people are really arrogant. There's Bavaria and Hamburg, and it's all kind of a uniqueness of history. Bavaria was the first Christian German kingdom, and the longest independent kingdom before, when Prussia took over Germany. Bavaria is still a kingdom. It was a union of crowns still.
Yeah, an independent
Bavarian kingdom existence. And Hamburg is a completely different story. Hamburg is, most of the duchies and small kingdoms were ruled by bishops, lords, and, counts and kings. Hamburg was ruled by tradesmen, and had the reputation of being the naughty boy in the Holy Roman Empire, the one who didn't follow the rules. When the emperor made the decision that there was a trade blockade against Sweden, they just said, fuck you, we're going to trade with Sweden anyway. We don't give a shit. And the Hanseatic League that they formed, the Trade Confederation of Independent City-States, and that spirit of independence is really deeply ingrained within Hamburg, within its culture specifically.
Yeah. But yeah, but that's the thing. I always found that spirit of independence very admirable. And I guess it's the sort of just being an Englishman that it just appeals to me. It's like, yeah, well, fuck those people. Why should they be in charge?
The aspect of it in Germany that makes it so different is that it's a very patriotic thing. It's a regional patriotism. It's the kind. People in Germany, you're always asked around the world where you're from, but people in Germany ask Germans where they're from.
Yeah, I can believe that. Don't you guys have regional accents though?
Yeah, very strong ones as well.
Yeah, very strong. You can tell.
Yeah, people can tell where I'm from, and I'm a mix. Because I spent some of my childhood in Lower Saxony, and some of my childhood in Northern Austria, and some of it in Bavaria. So it's a weird mixed shitty thing, which doesn't really make much of sense.
Well, this is the thing with this is the thing that Americans never understand. And I mean, I get Americans saying, "Yeah, but you live in a monarchy. The Queen is the head of state, and she's also the head of the church. Therefore, you're a theocracy." It's like, dude, you have to understand. You're talking about something that's evolved over 1,000 years, if not longer. And yeah, there are a lot of like holdovers, but it's not as you think.
Do you know N.C. Clark?
Sorry, say again?
Do you know N.C. Clark?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. She's a small conservative YouTuber friend of mine. And she made this ridiculous statement where she was discussing presidential politics, and they briefly talked about European politics. And they said, yeah, you people in Europe are not really a democracy because you have a queen. Yeah, please show me the Queen of Europe.
Yeah, but not only that. Show me the last time that the Queen of anywhere in Europe actually made any kind of political statements or even any kind of decisions.
Yeah, but in general, show me the first time we had a queen of all of Europe.
Oh well, yeah, obviously.
Yeah, many people tried that. It's one of those things that ends in a Russian winter. It's not really something that occurred. But yeah, it's funny that you should mention that, because the video I intend to work on is by one of these comedians on The Daily Show.
Oh, which one? Which one?
Oh, let me bring up the video.
Because they're all insufferable these days.
Yeah, they're absolutely horrifying.
It's so regressive. Honestly, under Jon Stewart, it was pretty good. Now,
Samantha Bee.
Oh no, I hate Samantha.
She made a video on Brexit. That's it.
Oh my god.
And it's horrifying. Her statement is, Brexit happened because 68% of the British population is white.
Oh my god.
It's fucking
what sort of fucking thing says that?
And the weirdest conclusion she makes in her video is that she draws parallels with Donald Trump and says that this British xenophobia, this European xenophobia, is imported to is an European import.
What Donald Trump's nationalist xenophobia is I suppose it is in a way. Like in a wildly, it did come from Europe nationalism, I suppose. So maybe, but like I think it's a bit of an obsolete point.
It's just a ridiculousness with which I'm sorry to say this. There's a reason why I don't often talk about American politics on my channel.
Oh, it is absurd in
for this
many ways.
Very simple reason that the more you talk about a topic you don't know much about, the more likely you are to make a fool out of yourself. Oh, yeah. And some Americans simply don't get it. Don't talk about European politics if you know nothing about it.
Yeah,
don't.
Most Americans are very bad at European politics as well.
Yeah,
they just don't pay attention. And don't get me wrong, I don't even blame them. Right? If you look at European politics, it is insanely complicated. You've got the politics of each nation, then you've got the politics of the EU, but then you have like the regional politics inside each nation. And so I don't blame you for not being really up on European politics. Nobody wants to be. It's fucking awful.
And there's the individual political cultures and history.
Yeah,
we have this joke in Germany that
then you've got 1,000 years of history to understand how it got to this point in the first place. So yeah, I don't blame the Americans for not getting European countries at all.
Yeah, I had this situation with an American friend of mine who asked me, please help me better understand European politics. And I said, okay, you start with modern European politics. Okay, let's start with Napoleon's invasion of Italy to make things simple. It's a complex net of things. You can't really tie it all together.
Yeah,
you get this joke in Germany that the German social democrat, the German socialist, wants basic housing and education for everyone. The French socialist wants champagne and caviar for everyone. You know, there's different political cultures as well. You're not going to get a Spanish conservative and the Polish conservative together into a room to agree on something.
No,
it's not going to happen. So many differing positions, opinions, various different political cultures.
Yeah, too many circumstances. That's the
thing. The British parliamentarian tradition, the French Republican tradition, the fairly new German Republican tradition, the mix of religion and state in Eastern Europe to a certain extent. You know, it's not simple.
Yeah, no, and not just that, but the sort of mindsets that are informed in each one as well are often very different, just because of the history. Like with the Poles and the migrant crisis, you know, they're right next to Germany. They share a lot of history and culture, and yet they have the complete opposite opinion of these migrants as the Germans. You know, and I mean, for someone looking from the outside, you might think, well, what? Why would that be so different? But obviously, there's lots of reasons, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. It's you can't throw all of this in a point. There's hardly anything that unites the continent. It's almost nothing.
This is why the EU is just a bad idea on the face of it. It's just, you know, I'm sorry, it just doesn't really make any sense. None of these people want to be in a political union, really. You know, you've just sold them this idea of, oh, wouldn't this be a good idea? Oh, it would be nice, but let's be honest.
It's not going to work.
Yeah, no, it's not going to work. It's bloody foolish.
And it's the fact that it is tried so many times before by force. What on earth will make you think that it will work by
goodwill?
Yeah,
you know, I'm sorry, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, it's not going to happen. And I mean, I have no problem with like basic agreements on trade. I have no problem with the free movement of people, but the idea that if you're going to have some kind of political communication system, somewhere where people agree upon, the only system under which it can work is a Swiss system, a confederation, where every state can say "fuck you."
Yeah, well, that's the thing. This is why I'm like all for like devolved states, effectively. You know, like literally just to have that kind of flexibility at a local level, I think would be really beneficial.
The problem with the Swiss system is that the Swiss system also created a couple of problems, if we're honest.
But I mean, you've got to admire the fact that a regular citizen can trigger a referendum.
Yeah,
that's a hell of a lot of power the average person has over the state.
But it's also the fact that's the thing that you go, for example, to the state of Uriel, the canton. I don't know what the English word for canton is.
Oh, we use canton. Actually.
Oh, the canton of Uriel. There's no separation of church and state. The state is officially Catholic. You can't divorce. There's Catholic influence within legal affairs, which is not okay. But the people there want it because they are, you know, social conservative Catholics.
Yeah.
Then you go to Geneva and heroin is legal. Because it's a left-wing city. That's one of the side effects of having a completely devolved system. You get the devolved system, you have to be afraid to a certain extent that if a small amount of lunatics manage to take over a certain part of the state, think shit. Sorry,
you cut out a bit there. Can you say that again?
The thing with a completely devolved system, you know, when you get lunatics in charge of a small amount of lunatics can take charge of an entire state and completely fuck things up for everyone.
Well, that's true, but really, they can only fuck things up for the people in that state, though, can't they? I mean, the other state, that's the thing. Yeah, I mean, I would rather lose a small part of the country to crazy anarchists or communists or whoever than the whole damn thing.
Yeah, and the thing about the Swiss system, I mean, it's true that what you said, that every citizen can essentially trigger a referendum.
Yeah,
it's really easy to do. But the thing is also that one of the side effects of the federal government being toothless, almost having nothing to do, is that almost every law that the Swiss federal parliament passes, actually you can't call it federal but confederate parliament, has to be approved by the citizens themselves. It has to go to a referendum. That's why the Swiss introduced women's suffrage in, what was it, 1968 or 1972?
Was it that late? I didn't realize.
Yeah, they had to vote for it in a referendum. Switzerland was the last country to abolish the death penalty Europe in 1989. Really weird laws. Sex before marriage was a criminal offense until 1986. If you got pregnant before being married in Switzerland, the state would take away your child or force you into an abortion. Jesus. And afterwards, the state would sterilize you.
Fucking hell.
Yes, until 1979.
Okay, I mean, I'm not suggesting we run a state like that.
Now, that's conservative notions find it very easy to exist in this, social conservative notions, populist notions.
I mean, I'd be surprised if the British public would ever go for something like that.
Yeah, but Switzerland is a conservative country. It's extremely conservative.
Well, I'm gathering that just from hearing about their fucking laws. Jeez.
Well, this is the past. I mean, it's not something that I hold against them. I actually admire the Swiss.
It's how recently these things were repealed that I'm amazed by, actually. Just like, oh, wow.
Yeah, but, you know...
like, within my lifetime. Holy shit.
Yeah, but... Yeah, it's not something I hold a grudge against them or
something. No,
like
of course not. Of course not.
I just take it as evidence that things go forward slowly.
Yeah. At least in Switzerland. But I mean, if you had a similar thing in Britain or America, I mean, honestly, I'd be worried about things changing too quickly. I would actually be worried about the opposite. Now I think about it, because, I mean, like with Jeremy Corbyn, people will come out if they think they've got some power over the system, and that's really the reason for such the sort of low voter turnouts in Britain, is people just don't feel like it does anything. But as soon as they feel like it does something, they come out in record numbers. And it's just like, okay, well, I mean, if they had more power on a local level, they would feel more enfranchised in the system.
Yeah, and that's one thing I mentioned in one of your live streams. That's why I believe that England needs a parliament.
So
its own parliament.
England needs its own one. Wow. I don't think it would ever happen.
Yeah, but if I were to ever apply for UK citizenship, which I'm probably going to again at one point, if I would ever go into British politics, that's the thing I would advocate: an English Parliament for the English people.
I think the English people see the Parliament of Britain as their parliament. That's the thing.
Yeah, and I think there is some convincing needed. I think that's how democracy works. You make your case.
No. I'm not saying don't make it. You know, I mean, you're obviously well within your rights to make the case. I'm just thinking of I would be surprised if it took hold in people's imaginations.
Yeah, but I think there's a case to be made for it. I think
there undoubtedly is. Undoubtedly.
And I think, to be honest, you would manage it better than Scotland did.
Of course we would.
Yeah, that's the one thing. I wonder why nobody mentioned that during the Brexit campaign. That most of the that the European Union has a pot of money that goes to the poorest regions of the European Union, and that Scotland was the biggest benefactor in Britain of that pot, and that is probably the main reason why the SNP didn't want to leave the European Union, because they wanted that money pot not cut off. And a lot of the subsidies that created these new glorious institutions in Scotland, I mean, Glasgow Medical School has a brilliant reputation now in Europe, were built with European money. And they didn't want to lose that.
That's the thing. I mean, everyone knows that Scotland gets a huge amount of European Union money. And I don't want to just chalk it up to that, but I just cannot understand the idea of a national party voting for Europe. What is wrong with you? You're the Scottish National Party. You fucking
they rebranded nationalism. I mean, in a certain extent, I like how they kind of try to reclaim nationalism for the left, because it can only be good for a country if, even the left finally starts taking pride in the country.
Well, yeah, I mean, absolutely. And there's no particular reason why the left can't be nationalist. I mean, if you care about, poor people and workers and whatnot, I mean, hell, that's what most right-wing nationalists were running on.
I don't even see nationalism as much as an ideology, as a concept.
It's more self-interest, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm more an advocate of the early one of the 19th century. The idea of creating a nation-state that guarantees its rights to its citizens.
Yeah, exactly. And it's your rights you're guaranteeing. This is the thing. During Brexit, some people were like, God, you're being so nationalistic. And it's like, no. Look, I'm saying that my right to vote for the people making the laws I have to live by is being infringed. This is about the consent of the governed. I could be in any country and I would have the same position, for fuck's sake, all right? It's, it's the fact that I'm not choosing that person.
Yeah, exactly. And that you have a unelected person, someone who appointed by a commission. I mean, it's
crazy.
Isn't it similar to what kind of spawned the nationalism in Europe in the 19th century, where people essentially decided, no, you don't have the God-given right to be the authoritarian monarch leader above us.
Yeah, the sovereignty is from the people. We are the state. You're not the state. And I think that's a really important mindset that people need to start really considering again, because I mean, this is the thing that, like, people are, they're not going to get an army. No, of course they're going to get an army. Well, they're all going, hey, we need an army, because they want an army, because they're looking to accumulate power. That's all they've ever done. Just the idea that no, they're not going to do anything. No, of course they are. Don't be a fool. It's fucking naive. Just look at any historical civilization. Anyone accumulates
more precise, I would say Juncker wants his army. Because he's pretty much
absolutely. He's the leading voice, definitely. Yeah, it's just the president of the European Commission, guys. Just the unelected chief of the whole fucking thing, basically. He's the one calling for the army. Fuck off with it's not going to happen. It just pisses me off so much.
I wanted to make a video on Brexit quite a while ago, on what it means for Europe. And
that's a good point, actually, because a lot of people in Britain aren't really thinking of that.
Yeah, I didn't think about Britain anyway. That's selfish reasons. I said, go out and give Europe a kick. I didn't care much about anything about the consequences for you, to be honest.
Well, no, of course not. It's not your problem, is it?
Yeah.
So, the European stock markets took a bit of a hit, didn't they?
Well, what good is economic wealth if you're not free?
Well, yeah, that's exactly my point.
The thing is that I noticed something that really boggled me, and that is Britain did play an important role in the European Union, and it's the only argument that would have swayed me into supporting Remain, but it's from a European perspective and not from a British one. And that is, Britain's role in the European Union in the past 30 years has been to consistently block overreaching federalization programs. Consistently throw them off the table. Say no to them and block them.
We vetoed the army in 2011. This again, the thing, they've tried to pass this bill already, but we vetoed it. Because they're not going to get an army. No, they're desperate for an army.
And we've gone. I noticed this debate, especially in some parts of the German media, and I have to read some French papers on this. People calling that the solution is more Europe.
Of course it is.
And these mainly being Europhiles and people like Juncker, etc. And I'm seeing a conflict appear here, because there are people who say, no, Juncker, you are the problem. You're the one who caused this. You're the reason why the UK left.
He is.
And this voice, I haven't really heard that yet before.
I mean, honestly, I think that most people's objection to the European Union is just the way they speak down to them.
Yeah.
I know that sounds crazy, but I swear to God, most people just have this innate distaste. Most older people who actually have, they're the ones who have actually listened to what these people have said and gone, why the fuck are they saying that? Or why are they acting like that? That's really disrespectful. And I honestly think that's what they voted for, is to get out of that.
Have you heard of the Austrian foreign minister?
Well, no, I don't know anything about him. No.
No, that was a really amazing thing. After Brexit, he essentially went to work and made a reform program, as a reform suggestions program. He drew up a list of things that caused Brexit in his opinion, economic things, blah, 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 set up a reform program and presented it to the European Union and said, okay, these are the suggestions I make for a European reform to make something like Brexit not happen again, to make it more democratic, more transparent and stuff like that. And actually some really good suggestions.
These do sound like good ideas.
Yeah, a polite, reasonable man. And they treated him like a child. They told him to fuck off.
See, this is this attitude. I can't understand how anyone can support these people with an attitude like that. And I know this sounds like, oh, that's not scientific. No, it's not. We're talking a philosophical objection to the way they're treating their position. they don't have any fucking gravitas. They don't have the sort of dignity I would expect of people who are looking to gain such marvelous power. You know, you would expect people who took things more seriously.
Yeah, you're not a king.
Yeah, you're arrogant. That's what it is. They're fucking arrogant.
You're you're an institution that is supposed to work with the countries. That's essentially what you proclaim to do, and you dismiss the foreign minister and his reform program. And the worst thing is how they've been treating the leaders of the individual European nations.
Yeah,
because let's be honest, their attitude after Brexit was, okay, we will have negotiations. We don't want to take revenge against Britain. It's their decision. Mm-hmm. We want to continue relationships. We want a good deal for ourselves, for them. We want to work on this. That was, the reaction coming out from the Chancellor's office, from the French presidential office, and so forth and so on, from the Dutch office, from the Belgian government. The only people who reacted like children were the fucking European bureaucrats. I think I gave you the report already that Martin Schulz, apparently, according to the early reports, was banging at his desk with rage.
Yeah, I heard stories, but I didn't have anything, I didn't mention it because I didn't have anything concrete on it. But that's exactly what I heard. That they were literally spitting at the just fury, and it's like, well, okay, tell me how this isn't an imperial project then.
Merkel is accountable to me. I didn't ever, and I'm kind of tired of being ruled from her for like 12 fucking years. Yeah. But she's accountable to me. She's my chancellor. I have the power to vote her out. The German people have the power to vote her out. She represents us, and if she wants to make a deal with Britain, she does so as a representative of the British people. Juncker, who do you represent when you make your deal? Who do you represent?
He represents the abstract state of Europe.
No, he represents nothing more than an empty, vapid institution.
Yes, exactly.
An institution that represents nothing more than the fucking institution.
Yes, he literally. It is. It's a house of cards. It's just nothing. There's nothing holding it all up but goodwill. And they do nothing but take advantage of this goodwill. And then they talk down to the people who are giving them what is, I can only really see as the benefit of the fucking doubt. I don't really... One of the things that people never said in the Brexit campaigns, the Remain camp, they never said how good things were going to be if we stayed in Europe.
Yeah, that's... Because the only argument you could make for a Remain campaign was, you are the ones who can improve Europe.
Yeah, or it'll be scary if we're not in Europe. And it's like, yeah, okay, but what's going to happen if we are in Europe? It's not going to get any better, is it? Well, no. I mean, Juncker, there was a Telegraph article a few months ago with Juncker going, Europe's best days are behind it. And it's just like, okay, that's really positive leadership from, why the fuck would we want to stay in this again? Sorry.
In Europe, that was probably interesting. I read the reactions by Denmark and Hungary, and they expressed a lot of sadness about Britain leaving, and mainly because they were allies considered within the European system. Because after Britain, Denmark has the second most exceptions in the European Union membership treaty. It's the nation that has the second most opposition. It's probably, and Hungary kind of considered Britain an ally in his struggles against the European Union. So Denmark is apparently now probably the country that has to fill your shoes in the European Union.
We're sorry, Denmark. We're sorry, man. I mean, the Netherlands not fairly Eurosceptic as well.
The thing about Euroscepticism is that it is so underestimated across Europe. It's almost 50-50 in every country. Population-wise, it's not a clear-cut deal, and the people in Brussels don't realize that their jobs are very much at risk, that they could pretty much lose their jobs at any time.
Well, I think a lot of them are actually coming to this realization, and I imagine the major worry would be the disintegration of the EU, because they must feel the sands shifting under them at this point.
Well, so, a lot of them are delusional. I mean, some of them really seem to believe that the Third World War will break out. the Germans will invade Poland again.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe they're making plans that we don't know about. I mean, the Germans will invade Poland. What do you mean? Well, we'll make the Germans invade Poland. But the thing is, honestly, the thing is, like you said, their jobs are at stake. Everything they have is at stake. You know, this grand project they've been spending, God knows, decades on now, is at stake. So when people are, when they're calling for more Europe, what I hear is more centralization, more power reduced from national governments, transferred to the central power. And honestly, I'm looking. All I'm seeing down the road is another continental tyranny.
Yeah. And the thing is that Juncker will definitely seize Brexit as an opportunity to push through the various programs, or at least try to, which the Brits blocked in the past.
Yeah, of course. I mean, honestly, the army is going to be back on the table within months, I think.
I'm pretty
sure
as
soon as Britain is out and unable to veto it, because we're still in at the moment, as soon as we're out and unable to veto it, I think it'll be back on.
And I think that, I do believe, however, that the European army has a lot going against it and a lot of things why it won't happen.
Well, you say that, but I mean,
I know that the institution wants it. I know the institution wants it, but the people don't.
Are you sure? Because apparently a lot of the MEPs are for it. I mean, don't get me wrong, the people in the countries probably are not for it. But I think it'll just be pushed through. It'll be another Lisbon Treaty, man.
Our participation in the Afghan war was so controversial, so incredibly controversial. The notion of German soldiers fighting in a war, it's hard to describe how controversial that notion was in our country. And the fact that, when we took part in the intervention in the Balkans, that politicians made their decision to just give logistic support to UK, American and French bomber planes, were assaulted during party conferences, had paint bombs thrown at them and shit like that.
Okay.
War, the notion of war is so controversial in Germany. I can tell you definitely that Germany will not support, the German public will never support a German centralized European army.
Yeah, but the thing is, what if like the French and the Italian public do?
I don't think the French would either. I don't think the French would. The army plays such an important role in French society. It's, the French have this, the French managed to preserve their patriotism, the pride, even in the left to a certain extent, a pride in the army, a pride in the military institutions and stuff like that. I don't think the French would do that.
Well, the thing is, I mean, I'm really having trouble understanding the mindset of the most zealous Remain supporters.
By the way, there's something I should mention. One of the reasons why the French government didn't want you to leave is because they considered you, that is at least an argument I read in the paper with an interview with a French population, they considered you the traditional ally on their side against Germany in case of invasion.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I mean, have you not, I've been watching a lot of videos from like the protests, the people are actually going out and protesting, and there are quite a few of them, and they really seem emotionally married to the idea of a united Europe. Like they seem to be very emotionally
in Germany, yes,
and not just in Germany, but in Britain. I mean, I was watching videos of the London protests, and like just hearing these like millennials talk about it, I was just like, I mean, it sounds very much like the Prussian concept of the state. It was an ideal. It was this higher notion to them. And going against it seemed to be a terrible thing. And I'm just like, that's so weird.
To be honest, I think most of them are just narcissists who think they can no longer take trips to Spain.
Well, I mean, a lot of them definitely are like that. And idiots, you can still go to Spain, you fucking morons.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that they started a petition for a second referendum speaks volumes.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But and the fact that millions fucking signed it. Yeah, but no, seriously, there's this kind of reverence for the European Union from these people, and I really cannot understand where it's coming from. And I mean, honestly, I'll find these videos. I'll do like a video compilation of some of it and talk about it, because it's bizarre. They're never saying anything concrete. They're always saying like vague generalities about how good and glorious the EU is, and it's just.
Well, I know where the German love for the European Union comes from, at least in the segments the public is supported. But I guess it's one of those political cultural things. It's different from country to country.
Well, yeah, I guess so.
The German reason is unification. German unification was only allowed under the condition the French and. Well, Thatcher didn't want Germany to reunite anyway.
Yeah, of course.
But yeah, under the condition that it would join a political union sharing power with France. And that was a condition for German reunification. So there's a notion within the German public, at least within the EU supporting segments of it, that a united Germany can only exist in a united Europe, peacefully. Yeah, it's the self-hate thing again.
Again, that's just like, look, everyone thinks that Germany's always trying to take over Europe, right? And I mean, that doesn't sound like it's not, all right?
Well, the funny thing is that, but trying not to take over Europe, we've taken over Europe.
Yes, this is the thing. Like, everything Germany does seems to be an attempt to take over Europe.
I mean, there's
by indirect means.
This is something I lost friends over this statement I made. I did a couple of years ago when I said that we should buy an aircraft carrier from the Brits and rebuild our army, our armed forces. And I made this statement because I do believe that we have a role to play in the world. I mean, we keep telling ourselves that we are supposed to do this small, insignificant thing. I mean, I'm not saying we are a world power. I'm not saying that we are, the European equivalent of
well,
China.
Economically, you are. I mean, there's no doubting Germany's economic power.
And I think we should have, at the very least, have as much clout internationally as France has. I mean, we have a role to play in the world, but the reason why the EU is going where it is going is because there is an unwillingness by Germany to essentially take up a leading role. German foreign policy can be summarized as, we don't care who you are and what you do, as long as you buy our cars, kitchen appliances, assault rifles, and tanks. And there is no, moral incentive behind a foreign policy. There is no, we stand for democracy. We want democracy in the world and stuff like that. It's all about trade, to kind of say, yeah, we don't enforce things on other nations. We don't demand things from other nations because that would be historically unacceptable. I think we have a role to play, actually. I think we should play a world. I believe we are one of the most functioning democracies in the world. I think we are one of the most morally upright nations in the world. I mean, we haven't been to war for fucking 60 years.
I would love to agree with you, but I actually think that Germany has too many neuroses that it needs to deal with as a culture.
Yeah, but these are recent diseases. I have to say that
they are, but they're also very strong and important ones.
I mean, we had the cancer of Prussian militarism. The problem is we rooted out that cancer not with chemotherapy, but by essentially cutting our own heads off.
Yeah, and this is the thing. I mean, I lived in Germany for 8 years. It breaks my heart to hear this sort of nonsense coming out of Germany. Like, anti-German Germans is, I find it personally offensive because so many of the Germans were just so nice to me. I never met a single German who was ever even slightly rude to me. And to suggest that these people are in some way immoral or don't deserve what they have or something like that, it just drives me nuts. Every single one of them was just a lovely, normal person, and it's just like, man, you can't have like an anti-German crusade.
The notion is dying. It is dying.
Terrible. It's tragic.
The notion is dying. The notion that we are this eternal savage people who have to be controlled. It's dying.
Good.
It really is dying. I can feel it dying. I have to say, I live in one of the few countries where I am optimistic about the future concerning, the SJW issue, because I think they came here to fight a losing battle. I mean, a monumental history moment in our history. It will be remembered as one, I think, was weirdly enough the World Cup of 2006. And the reason I'm saying is, it was the first time since 1944 probably that you saw German people, the German public, waving their flag in pride.
Wow, actually waving a flag. That's scary.
Well, that's monumental for us.
Christ, German militarism on the rise. Quick, shut it down.
I told you that before we went live, the Greens made this stupid fucking argument. I forgot to make a video about it, saying that, oh yes, you should not wave the German flag to the European during the European tournament because that is party patriotism.
That's proof that you're trying to exterminate the Jews or something.
Yeah, pretty much. That just leads to evil things, and what the hell?
It's like, okay, calm down. Most nations don't do what the Nazis did and are quite patriotic. So, calm
you know what the ironic thing about the German flag is?
No, go on.
It was banned under the Nazis.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, because the black. Do you know the origin of the black, red, and yellow? The black.
No, I don't actually.
During the Napoleonic occupation of Germany, there was a regiment of students, university students, who gathered together. They said, "We have to kick this imperial power out because it's French. It can't enforce a French republic on us, and we have to build our own German republic." And they rose up against Napoleon. Their uniforms were black coats with bronze buttons and red trousers. And they were slaughtered by the French army, but that's where the flag came from. Black, red.
Oh, yeah, so they chose those. So the German flag is actually an anti-Nazi symbol.
It's a Republican symbol. Every tricolor, the French tricolor, the Irish tricolor, the Belgian tricolor, they're Republican symbols. They're a symbol of, the Enlightenment liberation values of the 19th century. And therefore, it was banned under the Nazis, and to a certain extent, banned under the Prussian state. So, but in the end, it's also irrelevant. I mean, I could say, yes, this flag symbolizes Enlightenment values. It's a symbol of a people who rose up against an imperial power. It's a symbol of a people. We had a failed revolution in 1848. It's a symbol of a people who rose up against the militaristic tyranny, and it's a symbol of a people who were oppressed by a fascist regime.
But the question is it a good idea to start crafting these new national myths?
Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to say. It's stupid to say that, because in the end, it's a fucking flag. Yeah. It's a flag. What the fuck do you want?
In the end, you're literally just going around in circles to create the situation for a new militaristic Germany, ideologically, and like you're just repeating history, basically.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah,
a flag is to a certain extent. A flag is something personal.
Yeah,
it's something that you identify with. And the fact that we in Germany are still debating the fucking flag. I mean, we're debating it to a lesser extent. The reason why I haven't covered the fucking green thing yet is because they were laughed off. And that was really pleasing to see. The German public reacting with a big fuck you. But the fact that we're still bringing it up really annoys me.
Yeah. I'm just tired of hearing it from the Germans.
It's going to die, though. I'm pretty sure it is, because people are getting sick of it. People are getting sick of this notion. I mean, there have been several events in the past few years which kind of shaped that. Reshaped the mindset of the average German. One major contributor as well is the fact that we stayed out of the Iraq War, because that will sound a bit überheblich, as we say. It gave us a sense of moral superiority.
Oh, I think this is where it has to go. Go on.
Yeah. And having that sense of moral superiority over the Americans and the Brits, that kind of, it was a good feeling. It kind of made us feel like, yeah, maybe we aren't that horrible.
Good, because they're not that horrible.
Led us on the path.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's that shit again. Is there anything else you wanted to ask me about Germany?
No, not really. I was, it's interesting hearing about all the stuff, to be honest. I like learning about all this sort of stuff.
Yeah, I'm going to try to continue giving more Europeans perspective on things. Tell more about even though I might end up moving to Britain within the next 5 years.
Oh yeah, but until then, at least you can give a sort of on the ground view of what's going on.
Pretty much. And I hope to do some of France as well. I tried my best to organize European subscribers to convince them into making videos. This is the thing I did.
Yeah.
But yeah, you probably have the same thing, even though you cover British subjects a lot of the time. You also have probably a majority American subscribers.
Yeah, if not a majority, certainly the largest minority.
Yeah, it's 40% for me.
Yeah, it's probably around that for me, to be honest.
Yeah, a quarter of my subscribers are Europeans, around a quarter.
I've got more British than European, understandably, I think.
Yeah, continental European.
Yeah.
Most of my subscribers are from the Anglosphere, from English-speaking countries. I surprisingly have a large number of Indians and South Africans for some reason. Don't really know why, but I've heard that the Indians have a very positive German stereotype.
Yeah, apparently Mein Kampf is quite popular in India.
It's
no, I'm not joking. It apparently really is. Because they see him as more of a sort of patriot, I guess.
Yeah, which is a weird thing. Probably most of them don't really know much about.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't think there are many Jews in India. Is probably the thing. So they I don't think there's like the like an archetype of like a persecuted race in their mind when they're thinking about it necessarily. But I mean, this is just what I've heard third hand sort of thing. But it it just seems like it's just bizarre, isn't it? Hitler was a great patriot. Well, I mean, yes, he was, but
I would actually argue that he was very unpatriotic.
Really?
Because what the Nazis essentially did was annihilate segments of German culture.
Yeah, but that wasn't their intention.
Well, I would have to argue against that. That it must have been their intention to. They annihilated certain traditions. For example, in Hamburg, they have this tradition.
Not like that. What I mean is that in a conceptual way, not on a direct local sort of level. Yeah, of course.
They created a mythical version of Germany.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about.
A myth, which was absolute nonsense, which completely ignored the past, ignored the hundreds of years of culture that had built before.
Yeah, I mean, all of these myths are just nonsense. Though. That's the thing. This is the eternal thing with just any kind of sort of collectivist sort of myth making like this. It's just like, look, it's never really going to be very true. And I mean, what do you want to do with it? Do you want to go to war over this? Do you want to go to war over something that isn't really true? Come on.
Yeah, it's the thing about totalitarianism that it requires a myth. If it requires a myth.
Yeah, an ideal of some kind, and it's like
they work hand in hand.
Yeah,
you have to, because if you build your entire ideology on a myth, on something that is completely untrue, you can't defend it in a court of reason, in the marketplace of free ideas. You can only defend it with the bayonet.
Yeah. And this is, I mean, that is social justice all over. That is why the Antifa groups are becoming violent, thuggish brown coats.
And the thing about violence, have you ever heard of Metternich? Lord Metternich.
I have, but probably from you. Tell me what you're talking about.
Metternich was the nobleman during the Napoleonic Wars. The Austrian emperor, due to incest, was a mentally dysfunctional guy, and this guy Metternich, he took over the state, and he built the post-Napoleonic police state, the Biedermeier period, which was copied in Germany as well, which was ruthless police state, no revolutions for 30 years, intrusion into private life, censorship and everything, executions, arrests and whatnot, torture, brutal. Yeah. But he was very efficient at it. He was the Bismarck of his time. But there's this one historical quote of him, and it's probably my favorite historical quote. You can do many things with a bayonet, except sit on it. And the truth about, if you resort to violence to enforce your means, it's the only way you have to enforce your means. Bound to violence for the rest of your political career, the rest of your ideology is bound to violence. Once you pick that path, that's the only way you can go. And behold, as Metternich died, revolution in Hungary, in France, in Prussia, in Poland. So there you have it.
Yeah. No, but he's absolutely right. I mean, this is really my. Honestly, I'm genuinely becoming quite terrified of the hard left these days.
Oh, I am already. You should be.
Yeah, no, I mean, like genuinely afraid of where they're going. Because where they're going is to a very dark place, and they seem to think that they're the first people to have ever gone there, or something like that. And it's just like, man, you guys just
we've been there before. We've been there before, and we know where it's leading.
Within 2 generations, 3 generations, we were there. We fought a giant world war. We're still learning about it, and you are literally just like, are we going to go fight the fascists in the streets? Really? Communists and fascists fighting in the streets again, is it? Is that really where we're back at? For fuck's sake. Well, it's crazy.
The thing about the fascist survey is that we don't have, well, at least in Germany, we don't have fascist street battles yet. I know they There have
But yeah,
been
but I mean,
Greece.
we don't really, because they're never actually attacking real fascists.
Yeah.
They're declaring anyone who they're opposing as fascists.
Well, the thing is, you don't have fascists.
Of course
I
not.
mean, it's the worst thing to be in Britain. You have a historical enmity with fascism.
Yeah, I mean, literally, you could never run on the platform of being a fascist.
Yeah,
ever. I mean, that would be the most. You would have no political career ever at all. You'd
it's
achieve
part of
nothing.
British pride.
Yeah, exactly. We are the people who fight the fascists, for fuck's sake. And
Yeah.
so to run around declaring everyone's a fascist is just like Don Quixote tilting at windmills. It's like, no, these people are not fascists.
Well, the line of it's not, you can't really call it a line of reasoning, but the thing these people have is they call you a fascist, so you're a person non grata.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's labeling to dismiss. You know.
I think I told you about this before. I actually had contact with anti-Germans when I was 19 years old, 20 years old. I got in a big spat with them. You know, completely disagreed with them on anything.
Yeah.
And the way they reacted to me, the leader of this guy, he was centered around these people. This group was centered around the University of Munich. He had a gulag list. I'm not making this up. He had a gulag list.
Yeah, I'm glad you recognize that silence for shock. As in, he had a list of people he wanted to send to gulags.
Yeah, he said when we're in charge, and he proudly told me, you're number one on my gulag list. He proudly told me that. You are a reactionary fascist. You're number one of my gulag list. And he told me that. And the thing about these people were they're the vicious, the most horrible of the Antifa, the anti-German, because not only did he have this gulag list, but the people on the list, he shared it with his ideologue friends, and these people were not scared of violence against people on this list. Well, I wasn't actually beaten up, but I didn't go to certain concert halls anymore in Munich, and I know that people. Yeah. I knew that people on that list were actually beaten into a bloody pulp. And the extreme left, the anti-Germany, that's them. You know, they actually, 30 people clad in black storming a police station and beating up police officers.
Absolutely fucking crazy. Especially German police are armed.
I know, which makes the thing red. Yeah, out of surprise, I guess. You don't expect a cop.
Well, yeah, I guess not. I mean,
but that's just the nice part. I mean, one of the parts. I mean, nice part is a horrible way of saying it, because people who basically disagree with them are assaulted on the streets, brutally beaten into bloody pulps, where people almost murdered, beaten into hospitals. It's one of the reasons why I am so scared of being doxxed, because if I get a German social justice audience, I will be again on the gulag list. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, no, honestly, these people genuinely do scare me. They scare me a lot more than far right. Everyone's like, "Oh, the far right." Yes,
well,
yeah.
We had far right terrorism as well. I mean, I can't deny. I mean,
I'm not saying they don't do anything. I'm just saying I find them less scary.
Yeah, the thing is, we crack down on them really tough.
Yeah.
I mean, in Germany, we had this NSU terrorist group. I don't know if you ever heard of them.
No, I never heard of it.
The National Socialist Underground. They just roamed through the country and murdered foreigners, essentially.
Right.
And when that case was blown open, because the police, this was a massive miscarriage of justice, because foreigners were murdered all across the country, Turks mainly, and the police thought it was the Turkish mafia. And then, by mistake, they found out that it was this Nazi gang. And ever since that happened, there has been a massive clampdown on neo-Nazi and fascist activity in Germany. Police clampdown. But nobody's clamping down. I just
assumed there'd always been one.
Well, you can't really. Sometimes, we had a bomb go off at the Oktoberfest in 1984, which was planted by a Nazi. And to this day, the second worst terrorist attack.
Right, okay, that's really interesting, because we don't, as far as I'm aware, we don't get much right-wing terrorism, like hard right terrorism in Britain. I can't.
It's almost a pendulum. It's a pendulum.
I can't really think of anything.
Well, because
I'm not saying we have
historical enmity of hate fascism as a matter of national pride. You defeated it.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Whilst, it's a pendulum almost, because you have right-wing violence and then it swings over to left-wing violence. And the thing I'm scared for concerning the United States, Sweden, and the UK, and other countries where you have social justice, Canada as well, is which way will it go? Will it go? I mean, I have to say, either it dies off completely. That would be the best scenario. But if it goes violent, the Antifa is really the best scenario you can get, because the other is that you have a British American version of the Red Brigades. And those were the real horrible guys, the ones that we had during the 70s and 80s, who planted bombs at train stations, at army barracks and stuff like that.
What's bothering me about this is how it's kind of coming together. It's crazy. I mean, you can see how morally justified the left feel. And it's like, look, you're just not morally justified like this. You know, you don't have any kind of moral justification to do any of the things you're doing, you know, terrorize the right wingers or anything like that. You don't, you know, that what they're saying comes from a legitimate grievance. You know, I don't necessarily.
They're not just terrorizing the right wingers. That's the thing about the Antifa. That's
no, I know. But the sort of the deep moral justification, there's just self-satisfaction with it. It's like, no, of course it is. We're obviously right, and they are obviously evil. So at this point now, anything follows, and that really bothers me. I don't see that coming so much from the hard right. You know, the hard right seems to be operating on a basis of, look, you know, this is our country, we're losing everything, we're all about to die. But it's a place of fear rather than like moral certainty, you know?
Well, for now it is.
Yeah, it is at the moment. Yeah, I mean, don't worry, it'll get worse. And it will become moral certainty as it gets worse and worse. But at the moment, it seems to just be fear. Whereas, and that's fine, because you can always allay these fears by making changes, you know, that we all agree need to happen. You know, these.
Well, if you talk to some of the Antifa members, you will notice that some of them genuinely believe, especially in Germany, that the fascists are about to take over.
Yeah, I know. They genuinely. This is why I think they're like Don Quixote. If anyone's never read I can't remember the title, like The Adventures of Don Quixote or something. I strongly recommend it. Yeah, this is where the Tilting Windmills comes from, because basically he read all these books about chivalry. And he went mad, thinking that everything was now as it should be in a perfectly chivalrous world, which he obviously didn't live in. He lived in a post-chivalrous world. So he was basically making things up in his own mind and seeing knights and battles where there weren't any. And that's exactly what these people are doing. You know, they're calling regular patriotic people who have got genuine concerns fascists. And it's like, dude, these people are not fucking fascists.
I would actually say that it is worse than that, because
God, that's horrible. I was trying to be realistic.
Well, because because Don Quixote never murdered someone.
He did. That's because he sucked.
Yeah, he never stormed the police station.
He did try, though. You know, he did try to he tried to beat up lots of people. It's just they were all tougher than him because he was an old man.
During the last summer, we had about 10 cars set on fire in Berlin a night for like 3 weeks or something. And it was Antifa members who went around and set fire to expensive cars, saying, oh, these belong to rich capitalists, so thereby they must be fascists, the enablers of fascism, so we're going to set fire to their cars. That's
how it works.
Yeah, that's what these people do.
Yeah, I know. Don't get me wrong. I know they're crazy, and this is why they scare me. This is why they scare me a lot more than the right wing. I don't think the hard right are that great.
Since you remember the right wing, the identitarian movement, the alt-right, virtually non-existent in Germany, like 3 years ago. It started to appear last year here, and I can right out tell you, it started to appear because of the Antifa.
Probably, yeah.
Because the Antifa legit, it does.
Yeah, that's the thing. They've created a boogeyman and told a bunch of people you are this boogeyman, and then some of them start identifying that way. Because, well, okay, if you're saying I'm the opposite of you, you're a total cock. You know, that everything about you is abominable. So why wouldn't I say I'm this thing if it's the opposite of you? Because these people are they're the worst fucking people in the world. I swear to God, they're just awful.
Well, they are ISIS.
Awful people.
They're ISIS. It's the ISIS mindset.
Well, that's the thing. ISIS are the SJWs of the fucking Islamic world, you know. These people are, yeah, you're right. It's this kind of, it's a terrible mindset. And we need there must be a good word for it in German.
You know what horrifies me? The Antifa more over the regular college SJW in the United States.
What's that?
It's that they're uniformed. You know,
yes, and they've got
the video I wanted to make what's her name? The Canadian. She's on Rebel Media.
Lauren Southern?
Yeah, Lauren Southern. Yeah, she made that Antifa video,
I
and
haven't seen it actually. I haven't seen it yet.
yeah, I wanted to make a reply
I've just
to
been
it.
Googling and finding things about them, but yeah, I've got to. Why was it not like hardcore enough or something?
No, well, I just wanted to make a reply to it in the way of, you're getting this completely wrong. The situation is a lot worse. Because they come around the propaganda sticker around a German lamp, which says wir gehen schwarz, we're going black, and the guy she's interviewing is like, yeah, this is about race mixing. No, we're going black means we're going to dress in black. Yeah. That's how they dress. They dress in black. They're uniformed. They have their black uniforms. This is the scariest aspect about them. It's scarier than any notion you may have of enforced multicultural delusions of race mixing and whatever bullshit cuckery. No, these people are fucking uniformed.
Honestly, I'm really pissed off at the lack of government reaction to all of this.
There's a government reaction.
Well, yeah, I suppose. But I mean, we never hear about anything like that in this country, unfortunately. So if there is, I've not heard of it. But what's the reaction?
The intelligence service is investigating them and placing V-men, spies in them.
Good, I fucking hope so. Because these people are a legitimate danger to the state.
Here's the thing about the German intelligence service. You know, we're all not fans of state surveillance and shit like that. But they've done a really good job in past years. You know, they have the experience with the left-wing terrorism we had during the 70s and early 80s and the right-wing terrorism we had in the late 80s and early 90s. And because of that experience, we haven't had a single Islamic terrorist attack in Germany yet. And we had 12 prevented attacks or something like that. And I have full confidence in them, rooting out this problem. I'm pretty sure that once the far left makes one big mistake, planting a bomb somewhere, it's over for them. It's why the intelligence service, after the NSU thing, clamped down on the far right so extensively and so effectively.
That's a good point, actually. It hadn't occurred to me that Germany hadn't had a terrorist attack on its soil from Islamic terrorists.
Well, some of it was miraculous.
Yeah.
Have you heard of the attempted bombing in Bonn?
I did know there was an attempt, but I don't know anything about it.
The guy essentially planted a bomb with a timer, what's the Zünder? Igniter? Yeah. And he left it at the Bonn train station to go off during high traffic hours. When the full probably killed up to 50 people. And a schoolboy who misbehaved was sent home early from school, went to the train station, saw the bag and kicked it around the platform. And by kicking it around the platform, he defused the bomb.
Well, that was quite lucky.
Yeah, miraculous. So kids, kick the bomb if you see it.
Yeah. I mean, they don't just explode, apparently.
Yeah. Well, it's something that someone in the chat mentioned. Someone who probably saw an earlier stream of mine. It's a nice story I like to tell. When I was 9 years old, I was at my granduncle's place, and I found a Soviet hand grenade in the ditch. And I picked it up and threw it against the wall of the house, hoping it would blow up. But it just fell to pieces. And my dad found me, and I got the beating of a lifetime.
Poor Soviet hand grenade.
Yeah.
Brilliantly made. This thing is might well have fallen.
I have many stories like these. Yeah. I have two friends who went to a river to swim. My dumbest friends, because they found a Soviet bunker bursting 60mm mortar bomb. Yeah. This is a massive mortar bomb. These were, these massive mortars the Soviets had around the wheels. These were designed to essentially turn bunkers to rubble.
Yeah.
They picked it up and played hot potato with it.
I mean, that's like, well, I mean, I would be shitting myself. It would be the sort of thing I'd be like, no, we should really go tell our parents at this point. I don't want to be a pussy about this, but this thing could blow up, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And we don't know that it won't blow up, so let's just be pussies about it this one time.
If you ever go to Germany and you find one, there's always a bronze-colored thing on top which looks like a little bit like a nipple. That's the detonator. Just saying. Don't touch that.
Okay.
And if it's black, hexagonal, and long, don't even pick it up. That's a incendiary bomb filled with white phosphorus. And out of all the ways you want to die, you don't want to die with white phosphorus going off in your face.
Certainly do not. Just, I have got many more preferred ways of dying than white phosphorus to the face. And honestly, even if you don't know what that is, you do as well.
Yeah. Well, going back to the topic before, you know, I am really scared that you will be seeing violence. I mean, extreme violence.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, I mean, these people are eventually going to try and overthrow the government. So, and I'm not being hyperbolic. That's what they will try and do.
The thing is, the Red Brigade tried to overthrow the government, and they were not successful.
No, but they will try. This is my point.
And they cause damage. They cause fear. They cause a disruption.
And this in and of itself necessitates more dictatorial rule from whoever the power is. The people demand it. You know?
Yeah, that's the weird thing about terrorism. When we had this left-wing terrorism in the 60s and 70s,
it's going to create the fascism they despise.
Actually, no, because our chancellor back then was Helmut Schmidt. I don't know if you ever heard of him. I believe he's one of the greatest.
I do know the name, but I can't tell you anything about him.
I think he was one of the greatest chancellors we've had.
Okay.
In our country's history. And the weird thing, when the Labour, the employment minister, was kidnapped, he essentially held a speech, essentially saying one thing: I know you're watching this, and I know you're happy, but you're not going to be happy for long, because democracy will prevail. It has always prevailed. It has overcome far greater burdens than you. And in the end, you will be the losers. And that was pretty much it, because not only did he refuse to enter in negotiations, he refused to have his intelligence service, spy on people. And instead, he encouraged public broadcasts saying, oh, yes, please inform us if you've seen that man. I mean, in the end, it didn't help. The Labour minister was murdered. But this is a man who ardently refused to build a surveillance state to combat this.
That's. I mean, how did the problem get solved in the end?
In the end, the problem got solved with the hijacking of a plane over Palestine, where a combination of German left-wing terrorists and Palestinian terrorists, kidnapped a German airliner, forced landed it in Somalia, and Helmut Schmidt, refusing to negotiate, said you told the German police to storm the plane and kill the kidnappers, which they did. And this led to terrorists in prison, in the cells, who were negotiated for, who the terrorists demanded to be freed, hanging themselves in their cells. And these terrorists in the cells were the big shots, the big wigs, the ones who ran most of the thing. And with them, the things started to gradually fall apart.
So he absolutely did not capitulate and defeated them decisively.
Yes.
Oh, good for him.
Yeah, and it's a weird thing. When you read his biography, he actually had a pact with his own wife, which is a really weird one.
Go on.
In which they both agreed that if one of them was kidnapped, the other one wouldn't make an appeal for negotiations, or would negotiate.
This guy fucking uses it, isn't it? Jesus.
Yeah, it's the only way to deal with such people. But yeah, we're not there yet, and I hope we're not going to get there. But I'm really scared that
we're definitely on the road. That's the problem. That's really my problem with all of this. Is we just need to keep walking, and we'll end up there.
And the thing about the state surveillance argument, it really doesn't take much knowledge to build a bomb.
No,
it's half a semester of chemistry at university level, and you know how to build a bomb.
Honestly, probably just find a blueprint on the internet these days.
Yeah. And you can't track these things, and it's easy to build a bomb. It's difficult where to plant it. And as ironic as it is, with the gun debate going on, it would be really amusing if the left-wingers in the United States, if they start getting violent, and they're the ones who keep arguing for gun control, go take guns to kill people.
Nah, they'll use bombs. They won't use guns.
Yeah.
They're not personally brave enough to use guns.
But to be honest, a lot of them were morons. when I'm talking about the 60s and the 70s.
Yeah, that's true.
There
But a
was
lot of them now aren't morons.
I mean, in the sense of incompetent. That there was an attempt to establish a Red Army Brigade in Austria, and they wanted to blow up the main electricity supply for the city of Vienna, and they blew themselves up because they were too stupid to build a bomb.
Well, I mean, I would hope that would be the case, but I think they certainly would try to bomb places rather than to do any kind of gun violence. I don't think they've got stones for it, but I think they have got the will to plant bombs.
You know, if such a situation really would manifest itself with left-wing violence taking place and left-wing terrorism taking place in the United States, the thing I really fear most is that I would be thrust into a situation again where I have to, defend violence, the measures of violence, because for people like us, it really is the last measure to take.
Yeah.
And it is an uncomfortable situation to be in.
Yeah, but I mean, at the end of the day, it's this is the thing. If that's what it's going to come down to, then I would expect the state to respond with violence. I expect the state to defend itself from a terrorist organization that's trying to take over. I would expect the army to fight them. If they're going to fight back, if they're going to attack the state, the fucking, my representatives, then I would expect those representatives to ensure their own position.
And it's going to be like the Islam situation, because you're going to have people like Reza Aslan again, who is essentially an apologist for people who burn books and beings.
He's fucking terrible, isn't he?
Yeah, and you're going to have a these people as well. I mentioned the trial for the former Red Brigade members. It was infuriating to watch, because one of the people who attended the trial, one of the people who helped, set it up, was the son of the man who was murdered. And he was just had to sit there and watch people protesting in favor of the people who murdered his father when he was a child.
Jesus,
this is the kind of situation you will get in. This kind of narcissism, this nastiness that comes out of this application of violence. And if this left-wing violence manifests itself in the UK or the United States, you're going to have to deal with people like that as well. There's also an uncomfortable part of it. But yeah, I hope it doesn't manifest itself.
Well, I do too, but I really think it's going to. I mean, it just seems to be building, and these people seem to be becoming more emboldened.
Oh, you have no fucking clue how emboldened these people are. Attacking a police station.
Yeah.
I mean, for fuck's
it's crazy. I mean, it's just like, holy shit. That's fucking serious.
I think I dropped out.
Oh, sorry. Are you still back, yeah?
Yeah, I think I'm...
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's insanely serious. And it's troubling times ahead, I tell you. It really is. I don't want to sound like a fearmonger.
Well, it's troubling at times for some people. I'm actually very optimistic concerning Germany. I'm very optimistic.
Well, I would like to share your optimism, but I am genuinely worried about these political groups that are radicalizing themselves.
Well, we've had them in Germany for decades. We had them in Germany for decades, and we're getting sick of them. That's
the thing is that the public here aren't really prepared for it. I think they think all this is nonsense and isn't really happening, and kind of live in a state of denial, to be honest.
You believe that? Did you ever actually have terrorism in the UK besides the 7/7 bomb?
Say again?
Did you ever had a organized terror? Yeah, you had the IRA.
Of course we did, yeah. 30 fucking years of it. So yeah, we are familiar with like terrorism, but it's more that it's been over for quite a while. And I think there's a generation that's in the middle class now. Generation X are kind of just being fat and lazy, and I don't think that they can... Yeah, I don't think they know that they're supposed to be standing up for something.
That's the thing that the Red Brigade members all had in common. They were all middle class or upper class, the children of army chaplains, successful lawyers, successful judges, rich kids who decided to murder people for communism.
Yeah, exactly. Murder poor people for the greater good.
Yeah.
What a
Murder
wonderful.
police officers and politicians, Labour minister, of all people to murder, the employment minister.
Yeah,
Which,
Jesus.
yeah.
But right, it's coming on 2:00, so I think we should probably
End it here.
call it a night there. Yeah, but it's been a very nice chat. I really have enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
You know, my pleasure, honestly. I'm sure we'll do it again sometime. And I hope everyone listening has been enjoying it as well, because yeah, it's just nice to be able to discuss these kind of concepts, because it's actually quite hard to have a conversation like this, because what you're dealing with is in often cases so abstract that it's real, but you know, these things are forces that we're talking about, but they're hard to really quantify.
There's nothing abstract about 30 people attacking a police station.
But that, yes, but it's explaining that. I genuinely think most people have no fucking idea why that's happening. You know,
once things become reality, people start to understand more clearly.
Well, I hope so, but I really do think there's a lack of understanding about the ideological motives of these people. You know, I really do think that.
Oh, the ideological motives are irrelevant. They're completely irrelevant, to be honest.
What do you mean?
At least they're not. But for the middle class, they are. I mean, once you start planting bombs in a city square, you're not exactly making friends.
Oh no! I wasn't suggesting that. But
no, what I'm suggesting is, once bombs go off, people are not going to support your cause, no matter what.
No, that's true. Of course, that's not what I was saying. I'm more thinking about just a general understanding of why these people would be setting off bombs. I mean, whether they support it or not is irrelevant. It's more that, I mean, for example, I've seen a lot of pro-communist stuff on the BBC recently, where they've done because Jeremy Corbyn's a Marxist, and he took the Labour Party by storm, and so the BBC started getting a bit more, sales of communist literature are up and things like this, and I'm like, yeah, but that's not really a good thing, is it?
What kind of communist literature?
Oh, like various, undoubtedly the manifesto, but you can find that for free.
Oh, for fuck's sake!
But no, like not just that. There were actually other books that people had written. I can't remember off the top of my head, but they were like just books written by the communists.
Mao's Little Red Book.
No, more modernist sort of stuff. Probably revisionist. I can't remember what it was. But,
then it's mostly postmodernist crap.
Yes, that's exactly it. But the sales of this stuff was on the rise, and everyone was just like, they were talking about it in very positive terms. This is left wing, blah, 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 and it's like, yeah, okay, but there are bad things on the left as well. It's not, the right doesn't have the monopoly on destructive political ideologies. We have our own share on the left, and so let's not get over head over heels for communism making a big return. All right, for fuck's sake.
Let me just clarify one thing on this regard. Whenever you see the sales of political book going up, the only thing it means is that more people are not reading it. People are just buying it because they heard about it on television.
Entirely possible, but I don't know.
I have never met a single Second World War veteran who read Mein Kampf.
No, but these are students becoming radicalized, basically.
Oh, students. Yeah.
So I mean, the sales are not just students, but I imagine that a lot of them are.
I've read some of this. I've read Adorno. I've read The Dialectic of Enlightenment. And let me tell you right away, it's bullshit. It's crap. He spent 50 fucking pages to only formulate one thing, and that is that he believes that the Enlightenment is an instrument of capitalism because it serves no other purpose other than bring new means by which to make capital, and as such it's just a side effect of capitalism.
The expansion of brotherhood to all of mankind.
Yeah, that's
what.
But that's the thing. The point I wanted to get to. Not only is it gibberish, but he spends 50 pages to explain that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But it's just I love the idea that it's the idea to get past these sort of boundaries. It's ultimately the ultimate philosophy is every man is a man. We're all the same. Therefore, these borders, these divisions, they don't change what each person is worth.
Yeah, not everything is about capitalism.
Yeah, exactly. The idea that that's somehow a capitalist thing. What are you talking about? You know, fucking. Oh god, it's just an idea. It's a principle.
I probably should read the book again and present it in a video series. Or
yeah, you should, because I'd be interested in hearing about that waffle.
Well, it's fucking horrible to read. It's horrible to read. It's as I told you before, 50 pages to get to that point.
Fucking man, that is painful.
Yeah.
That is, yeah, that is. I haven't done that either, and I don't think I'd want to.
Yeah, I'm German. I like things clear cut.
So, but yeah, anyway, anyway, thanks everyone for listening,
you.
and yeah, thank you so much for coming on. It's been very entertaining.
No problem. No problem.
Right, take care, everyone.